I wanted to start this with a little bit of a thought experiment. So the medieval times, Middle Ages, 500 to 1500-ish. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's about right.
If I ever say something in my history is just wrong,
for sure.
Actually me.
Okay, will do. Yeah.
So we're very close in age. I'm 27, you're 30. I want you to take us back to what it would have been like for us in the Middle Ages at our ages. What were we doing? Where most likely would we have been living? What did our day look like?
Yeah, probably we're dead. Statistically, we're probably dead.
Oh,
but
all right.
I mean, it depends on where and when you are in the Middle Ages. I think just the Monty Pythonification of history has us all kind of imagine the Middle Ages as a sort of like monolith, where there's a time and a place and everybody's kind of dressed the same and it's muddy and dirty and this is how everything is. But kind of there's ebbs and flows in terms of what we would describe as the level of civilization or the level of social progress throughout the Middle Ages in different places. My videos, I typically tend to talk mostly about Western Europe. I touch on Eastern Europe. I had a video about China. I'm kind of going all over the place, but Western Europe specifically. So, I mean, it would depend. In the later Middle Ages, we might be part of like the urban bourgeois, like we might be merchants, we might be city dwellers. Chances are statistically, we would probably be peasants working the land. You and I would both be married. We would probably have 6 or 7 children, maybe only like 2 of whom had actually survived past like the age of 1. And we would be kind of under the feudal yoke of a lord, and we'd be renting our kind of strip of land from him, and we'd pay a certain percentage of what we make to him, and then the rest would keep for ourselves. But the trade-off is, and there's a lot of like memes about this, that people in the Middle Ages had more days off than we do, because obviously Catholicism was such a big part of the social calendar. So you had your feast days, kind of your specific like days of the saints, all these like different celebrations. So it was like over 100 days out of the year that you could not work, like legally could not work at all. But I think the trade-off to that is there's so much that in our modern world I don't think we realize we don't have to do. We don't have to build the fire, we don't have to tend the fire, we don't have to chop wood, we don't have to fix things around the house, we don't have to mend clothes, we don't have to, like all these things that would take up all of your free time.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect too, that, you know, they were busy a lot. But yeah, I think also age 27, age 30, we'd be considered like full adults, in a sense that I think I hear a lot of people now say, oh, you're in your 20s, you don't have to have it figured out. You're in your 30s, you're still figuring it out. Like 27 or 30 in the Middle Ages, you would have to have it figured out. I mean, if you were like a lot of the like military and political leaders of the Middle Ages were so much younger than we could possibly fathom, especially in the era of like Donald Trump and Joe Biden, where it's like, if you're not 80 years old, then you're not qualified to lead. Like most of the most famous figures from medieval history, when they took power, were like 17 or 18 years old, leading massive armies into battle and making these insane decisions that like shaped the future of Western civilization. Statistically, again, that wouldn't be us probably, but we would probably have a lot more responsibility now than I think the average 27 or 30-year-old would have.
Well, you already kind of shattered 2 perceptions that I had about the Middle Ages. The first was that you said we're most likely dead. I kind of always questioned the mortality rate. Mm-hmm. Is it actually quite high or what?
So the infant mortality rate is what offsets it. So in my comments section, I'll see a lot of people say, well, statistically I would be dead.
Yeah.
You know, nobody lived past the age of 30. That's not true. I mean, there's tons of surviving medieval chronicles. Basically, if you could make it to adulthood, make it to age like 16, then chances were you would live a pretty normal life. But I mean, you have to factor in like malnutrition, disease, famine, drought, those sorts of things. Depending on where we lived, if we're on like the, you know, northern coast of Anglo-Saxon England during the Viking invasions, like our life expectancy might be shorter. So the fact that infant mortality was so high offsets it like makes the like death average younger than it would be otherwise. But if you remove that from the statistics, like life average was longer. But because of that high infant mortality rate, chances are we would have been born and died fairly quickly. But if we made it past like a certain age, chances are
So removing the infant mortality rate, did adults live the same amount or longer in the Middle Ages?
It depends. There are like there are some famous figures from the Middle Ages who lived, you know, to age 80 or 90. And then there's somebody like a Charlemagne who's in his 60s when he dies, and he was considered pretty like weathered old man. He's described in all the contemporary chronicles. They're always talking about like how gray his beard is and how old he is, even though he must be like 40 when they're writing about that. So it's like he's considered old and wise. And that's another, I think, kind of interesting thing as well, is that, we have this kind of ancient wisdom of our elders. And I think more and more the younger generations, even though this has been throughout history, kind of like disregard what the older, we're like, okay, boomer, that's our new thing. But that's been going on forever. But if you think about it, in medieval society, like if you made it to age 50 or 60 or 70, like you had done something right. You had managed the world in an adept way, and you had somehow managed to live to this old age. So you must have, like, I'm going to gather around the hearth to hear what lessons you have to transmit to me. Whereas now it's like you can sit in front of a TV for 70 years and live, on, so it's like, I don't know. That's not to say the wisdom is less useful, but it's just like reaching an older age. Yeah. And it also was a sign of blessing from God that you had been protected
from all of the things,
from ills, from all the things that could have happened to you. Yeah.
I was just asking, my wife and I were just wondering about this. We were about to pray before we ate, and she was like, I wonder why we do this. And I was like, I wonder if it's because, first of all, most of the time you're just like so pleased that you had something to eat. And second of all, I don't know why, I was like, I feel like this has something to do with the plague, because I know like the rosary in the 1400s was shaped by like now and at the hour of our death was because like it might be today. Yeah. And so do you know anything about like grace?
The history of praying before meals, I'm not sure. I feel like, as far as I'm aware, that's been like an ancient Christian practice since like the earliest days of the church. Yeah. Because in the early days of the Christian church, they were meeting in people's houses and basements and breaking bread together. So I would assume that was like communal prayer before dinner together. So I would assume that's where that came from. It might have a tie-in with like the Last Supper, communion, things like that. But in terms of now and at the hour of our death, that's really interesting. In the early Middle Ages, actually like all the way from like Constantine, so the late Roman Empire, into the early Middle Ages, there was this idea, and you see Augustine talk about it, St. Augustine in Confessions, that you shouldn't become baptized until you are on your deathbed. It kind of comes to this idea of, so like deathbed baptism was a Catholic tradition for a long time. Whoa. That when you convert, like these Germanic kings who convert to Catholicism, do not get formally baptized until you are sick and like a day away from dying, because the baptism is what remits your sins. And so you want to enter the kingdom of paradise fully.
Do they not have confession?
All of your sins fully removed. Actually, it wasn't until the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 that confession and communion once a year became standard practice for Catholics.
So prior to that, it was what?
If you were like a member of the peasantry, you might only like once in your entire life have confession. It would be deathbed confession, like last rites. And then if you're a member of the nobility, it's difficult to say. In the later, like high and late Middle Ages, it became popular to hire your own private priest and have him do communion, and it was like a sign of status. But before that, maybe like a couple times a year, even like a king, like confession and communion.
So it was more of a luxury.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
An aspect of royalty and aristocracy that you had access to the sacraments.
Right.
And so what was the peasantry? Because I don't know if you heard, I said this on Matt Fred, I'm like, I want to bring back peasant Catholicism. And what I meant by that was like, stop going on Twitter and raging about whatever's happening in like the Catholic space right now. Because my understanding is that for the first 1800 years of the Catholic faith, you weren't reading anything because you couldn't read, and there weren't books. And you sure as heck didn't know what was going on in the Vatican. And you still, like, heaven is full of faithful Catholics. So how did they get there? I'm like, well, why don't we bring that back? Right. And that'll get into shift later. But tell me about like, what were the peasant Catholics, the peasant Christians doing if they didn't have, oh, I went to adoration this morning, and then I did morning mass, and then I prayed the divine office.
The center of medieval Catholicism for, I guess what we would say is like the uneducated peasantry, was the Eucharist. And even though it wasn't until the High Middle Ages that taking the Eucharist at least once a year like was a requirement, that actually raised the status of the Eucharist. And that's not to say that having the ability now to take it every single day like somehow diminishes it. Sure. But when it's this very special thing, and you're coming from this post-Roman, like early, like late classical, early Christian, mixing with pagan traditions in some places. And like, you're telling me, a peasant who's like, never read a book, never been to any kind of formal schooling, that this piece of bread here this is the literal body of my Lord and Savior. it became this like source of, they wouldn't have called it adoration then, but complete adoration of the physical object of the Eucharist. And I think it ties into something that we've maybe gotten away from, I think, post-Reformation, but this aspect of faith as a physical, like it has to be tactile as well. And I think Catholicism does a great job of that. You touch the rosary beads, you kneel at Mass, you take the Eucharist. There's the body and then there's the soul.
Yeah.
Like it's the two things together. And like peasant Catholicism was a very physical faith. The people would literally run into the cathedral when they heard the bell ring and the priest was raising the Eucharist up over the altar, because it was like, this is a holy moment.
Yeah.
And it was seen, at least in late medieval English Catholicism, it's difficult to say where else, but if you were a peasant or a member of, somebody who didn't have access regularly to communion, and you saw the Eucharist that day, like be raised above the altar at Mass, that would be like credited to you as righteousness. And if you died that day, it would count. Like that would be the same thing as taking communion.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That was from the church?
It was
taken
that seriously. Yes. Yeah.
And so were priests distributing communion to the laity at Mass, or were they just receiving it themselves?
They were receiving it themselves. Yeah. So they had these things called rood screens. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these in these old, but it was basically like, it was, I don't know. We still say this at Mass and we talk about this a lot as Catholics, but the mysteries of the faith.
Yeah.
And I think over time there's been, again, like not to come across as anti-intellectual, but I think sometimes over-intellectualizing can take away. Faith and intellect are not at odds, and I think that's an Enlightenment idea that's kind of, ruined a lot of the debate around religion and faith. But like losing that sense of mysticism, and like the priest is doing something up there that's so holy, we must be separated by a screen. And there was a lot of a sense, going back to the tactile nature of faith, the incense, the rood screen, the very architecture of a Gothic cathedral, the way the light comes in, the way the bells, like the sound design of how the bells ring in the church, it's all designed to do something to you from a faith, like to lift your soul up to heaven. For somebody, you might never read a Bible verse in your life, but you can walk into a cathedral and feel scripture and faith. Yeah.
So I hate Gutenberg. I have a grudge against him. And I get a lot of pushback from, I would say, modern Catholics that I've discussed what I'm about to say with, and I would love to hear your perspective on this, because I bet you'll also know the specifics of the debate that raged in the church after Scripture became available to the laity. But prior to the printing press, my understanding is that monks, friars, priests had access to Holy Scripture. Sometimes it was physically chained down. There was one copy, and it was hand copied by somebody who was ordained, who spent their life studying the gravity of what Holy Writ was. And then they had sort of impressed upon them this responsibility that you're going to shepherd a flock. And so you have to understand this in a way that nobody else ever even has the office or the time to do that with. Then the printing press comes out, and very shortly after that, we have the Protestant Reformation, and now we have Bible apps. Now we have Bible in the Year. Now we have all of these ways of just ingesting Scripture, and none of the formation that comes along with it. And despite the fact that Catholics still do intellectually submit to the magisterium, I see the effects of the ubiquity of Scripture now as having almost like a Protestant tinge in the Catholic world. And I wonder, and I know the church doesn't teach this, so I'm not saying that this is like what Catholics have to believe, but I wonder if there is a loss of mysticism and a utilitarian use of Scripture for our own ends, as opposed to like a receptivity. Like you go to Mass, you hear the words, and like that's your reception of the Scripture. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's something interesting to be said about like fast foodification of Scripture. Where it's like, you can even have a widget on your phone that's giving you the verse of the day from the Bible app and things like that. And I think when that's right next to the weather and your latest text messages, it can kind of water down, you know, the importance of Scripture. And I mean, the Bible chained down in the Middle Ages is one of the great Protestant, things that are pointed to as like, look at the evil of the medieval Catholic Church.
Right.
They chained the Bible so people literally couldn't read it. But if you think about that for 2 seconds, A, it doesn't make any sense, because if 90% of people weren't literate, then who were they preventing from reading the Bible?
Right.
Like a peasant. So the reason it was chained down is because it was priceless. It was
Yeah.
hand copied and covered in jewels, and like it was a
Yeah.
very important item. So it was chained down so bandits wouldn't steal it, not
Yeah.
so like the peasantry couldn't get their hands on it. And I mean, to a certain degree, I've throughout my faith journey like vacillated back and forth on the effects of the Reformation. And I'm going to butcher this, but I'm trying to remember, it might have been Zwingli or one of the early Protestant reformers on his deathbed said that he regretted partially the Reformation in the sense that he saw the consequences of it being, we destroyed the religious structure of Europe, which was the Catholic Church. And I think what people don't understand is that everything was seen through a Catholic lens. It wasn't just where you went to mass on Sunday. Like your entire worldview was seen through this lens of that this is the church and this is God's church on earth. This is his structure. And so we as reformers, this guy's saying on his deathbed, have completely like disassembled that and tried to get people to come to our denomination. Like we're setting up these new Protestant denominations, come to our church. But when you just completely destroy authority like that, it doesn't make people want to then follow your authority. It makes them not want to follow authority at all. And I feel like that's led us down this road of like complete, I don't know what you would call it, science-ism. I'm pro-science, but it's like science, it can't save your soul. Science can't even prove the existence of a soul.
I'm anti-science, don't worry.
But it's, so basically like you tear down the Catholic Church in Europe and it's not replaced with the Protestant churches. It's replaced with nothing at all. But anyway, all that to say that I do think also, I mean, in addition to being a tactile faith, medieval Catholicism was a very visual faith. If you go to any of these old cathedrals or really more usefully village churches, the murals on the wall are telling stories of the Bible. There's Noah's Ark, there's Jonah and the whale, there's all these things. And medieval people, medieval Catholics would listen to these stories, and it became part of their, if you read any medieval literature, every other sentence is a biblical reference. Like it's part of their, like,
how did they do that if they weren't reading scripture?
Right, exactly. Well, they were listening. I mean, that's the thing that's, I don't know. There's some people, I have this book club that I do on my Patreon, and people are like, does an audiobook count as reading? And I'm like, that's how people absorbed books for most of history. But medieval people viewed themselves as, I mean, this is a whole other topic, but as archetypes, not as individuals. So I am the archetype. I'm like Moses in the desert. I'm like Jesus, or I'm like Paul, and the scales fell from my eyes. Like they view themselves as these biblical archetypes. It's really interesting, the mindset of your average person before the modern idea of self-awareness and the individual, that you are a unique individual with your own qualities and traits, and those are worthwhile. Because up until the High Middle Ages, like for most of history, that has not been a thing. And especially the medieval mind, especially learned medieval men viewed themselves as biblical archetypes. So you are living out, like you are living scripture. And a medieval Catholic might not be able to say like, yes, that's James 2:26 you just quoted. But like they have the roadmap in their head. Like they would be able to express the ideas maybe better than we could.
I don't think it's a rabbit trail to go down, what you just said about individualism versus you're an archetype or you're part of a story, that you're not the protagonist. What an inversion.
I know. Yeah.
Wow, what an inversion. We are the protagonist. That is how we operate our life. And I think that's been accelerated by post-industrial evolution. Yeah, obviously, like at first you were just a cog in the wheel of whatever big industry. But then I'd say mostly in our generation, it became possible to literally do what we're doing. I run a software, you run a YouTube channel. That's how we make our money. I put my face on the internet, you put your face on the internet.
Yeah.
What has that done to us? Anything good?
It's difficult to say. I mean, it's really, the history of the development of the individual is one of the most interesting aspects of sort of, whether you want to call it progress or not, but the movement from point A to point B of Western civilization to arrive where we are now. And it's really something that started to develop in the High Middle Ages with the development in medieval Catholicism of what became like this very fervent, emotional, personal piety that kind of developed among your like peasantry and then your nobility and then this new class of like city dwelling merchants of we're no longer satisfied with just the priest doing everything for us. We want some sort of access to God ourselves.
Yeah.
That kind of led to a whole host of changes. But basically up until that point, if you read any like early medieval history, like let's say Charlemagne, for example, he's written, like any biography of him, he's written as an archetype from history. Like he's written as the great Roman emperor god king archetype.
Yeah.
He's written as the holy monarch archetype. He's written as the Christian ruler archetype. Like there's these like things that fit. There's like the holy fool archetype. There's the humble peasant archetype, whatever, who like goes to village church every Sunday and takes care of his family and his wife, and his individual quirks, his neuroses, his feelings, his personality traits don't matter. He's the humble peasant archetype. He's thought of as part of this group. And the downside to that is I think it makes you see so much with the medieval nobility not seeing the humanity in anybody outside of their own class, because if like the entire peasantry, for example, represents an archetype of the rustic bread and porridge eating peasant who has no individual traits and no intelligence, then like if raiders are coming and they're going to burn down his village, like I'm not going to send an army out to help because like I don't.
Were they calloused? Would you say that on the whole the feudal system was not very loving toward the peasantry?
I mean, that's a historical stereotype. And
I romanticize it.
Yeah. It's a historical stereotype. And the thing that's important to remember about feudalism is that most of the feudal system is not actually happening on paper. It's like handshake deals and like sworn oaths of loyalty to your lord. And he's swearing something back to you. It's called noblesse oblige. And he's supposed to owe something to you. So it's like, I work the land and I give you a certain percentage and I do these things for you. And in return, you give me fair treatment in the feudal court. Like you rule over my cases and give me fair treatment. And you do these things that you're supposed to do for me. You protect me. If somebody comes and attacks the village, you have knights that you'll send out to help. How much that actually happened kind of depends on time and place and individual personality. I think now everything is so systemic and bureaucratic that it's difficult for us to realize how much individual personality played a role, which is actually really interesting, like with the development of the individual. But even just looking at like medieval monarchy or medieval nobility, like in many cases, the success of a medieval monarchy rose or fell on the personal charisma of the king. Whereas now you could have a totally ineffectual president for 4 years or 8 years, and the country won't like fall apart.
Well, but I think in part, could that just be due to inertia, due to like mass? Like just for real quick, how many people were on Earth 500 to 1500 AD?
Yeah, not as many. Like
I know
like 10 million, 20 million. Not on Earth, on Europe, I'm thinking. But,
but 10 or 20 million, like that's San Francisco.
Yeah.
So I think it also helps to realize that when we're talking about a nation state or a nation, like especially like pre-Risorgimento Italy or something like that, you're talking about a couple thousand people in a geographic location. And so there was interface with the person who ruled over you, or at least you knew they were over that hill over there. And then when you have a country of 400 million people, I mean, the president could be dead and we have no idea for a long time because it's a super tanker. It's just moving through the iceberg.
I mean, we had a president for 4 years who was actively demented,
and nothing changed.
It was like Weekend at Bernie's. And
gas was cheaper.
Yeah. No, it's I mean, as kind of government systems, administrative systems, and bureaucracy got more complicated, and the level of education rose among those who were servants to the monarchy in the late Middle Ages, it did start to become more inertia. Like you'd have like there were French kings who were like completely insane, like thought they were made of glass, and like there's a lot of examples of there was inbreeding, there's things that cause problems, but the state continues, and it's really in the 13th and 14th centuries that the idea of the nation state, I'm English, you're French, he's German, start to kind of develop. But yeah, no, that it's a good point about inertia, and you start to see that more in late medieval. Whereas there's this whole concept that Tacitus, the Roman historian, describes. He calls it Comitatus, and it's really the story of early medieval kingship, especially among the Germanic rulers like the Franks and the Goths, of one central charismatic figure, a warband leader, who everybody swears their allegiance to.
Mm.
And the relationship goes back and forth. Like, I will lead you in battle. I will make sure when we conquer a territory, you get a good chunk of land, you get a wife, you're protected.
Yeah.
And in return, you owe me your military service and your loyalty.
Yeah.
And like, as like government and bureaucracy got more and more complicated throughout the Middle Ages, that aspect still stayed. Like, who is at the center of the spoke of the wheel? The Comitatus, the warband leader,
Yeah.
that's still important. And it isn't until like later in the Middle Ages that you start to see that fall apart. But even somebody like King John, famously one of the most inept English kings, who was forced to sign the Magna Carta, which gave over a lot of the privileges of royalty to the aristocracy, was like, I mean, just a personal, like, he was paranoid. He was, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, very lustful, and that got in the way of his like politics. And you just see so many things that like direct the flow of history that are really like personal quirks and personal aspects of these individual rulers in military history that I don't know, or in medieval history that I don't know are as prevalent today. Although in the age of social media, I think for the first time, or maybe just post-television, our president is as visible to us, even more so, than the king would have been in medieval Europe, because the king would travel around to the village courts. Like, you would have seen him once in your lifetime riding around. Like, the kings traveled a lot in medieval Europe. And now it's, I think maybe in the, let's say like 18th century, 19th century America, like, you'd see a newspaper drawing or picture of or he'd be on the money or whatever, you know, but it's like, maybe you never saw Abraham Lincoln. And now I wonder, just with how our politics are, if that idea of comitatus, like that idea of like sworn loyalty to my Twitter ruler, it's
definitely coming back.
Yeah,
it's hugely coming back. Well, in the Old Testament, God just communicated directly, or at least through a prophet, and then he gave the law. Here's the way that if you behave in society, if you treat each other according to these rules and customs, these 640 Mosaic laws or the 10 commandments, everything's going to be okay. And for some reason, the Hebrews said, no, we want a king. And God was like, no, you don't. They're like, trust me, we want a king. And that, I mean, the Old Testament is just then stories about, it sounds like the same type of neurotic, lustful, corrupted, insane men trying and failing to lead a people. And I'm curious if the same type, because the heart of man doesn't change, if the same type of men do still run the world, but there's an obscuring of what's taking place by way of bureaucracy. So it really is these types of demented, corrupted men. We just can't pierce the corporate veil, so to speak, and see that in the same way that you could hear about King John and his, I don't know, concubines, his whatever that he was doing. What do you think of that?
I think well, I do wonder, I think the average American has probably about the same level of knowledge of what's going on in Washington as your average medieval peasant would have of what's going on in London, like in the King's medieval court. So it's difficult to say in that regard, but I think the big difference is, and like, this goes in a million different directions. And when I go this way in my videos, I get certain comments, but it's like, you could, if you got enough of the peasants together and you guys all took your scythes, you could march on London. This happened. Like, and you could drag the king out and make demands. And now it's like, that's impossible, you know. So I think it does create a different paradigm in that regard. But I do think the mysteries of government haven't really changed much. I think people in the Middle Ages would have had a clearer idea that if they see the king ride past with his retinue and his horse, and they're like, that is the leader of our nation state right there, him right there, that guy on the horse. And more or less he was. It was different in different places in terms of the absolutism, but like in medieval England, the nobility had a good amount of power. It changed throughout the Middle Ages, but like the central power of the monarch was ultimately still the shot caller, same in France, etc. So it's like you could point to him. Whereas now it's like Donald Trump is the president, but it's like, who's really deciding these things, you know, behind the scenes and whatever. And there are always kind of the currents of history and what's the word, like foreign interests that are kind of interceding on with the king, and maybe in the Middle Ages there's a family he wants to marry into, so he has to send his army to this war so he can marry into that family and have children with this woman so he can like keep his legacy. And so there's all these things that like you're not seeing when he rides past on his horse, but at least in your head you know that's the guy.
Yeah.
He's wearing the crown. Whereas now it's like, who's really, when you see these decisions happen on a global stage.
So I would say this is a lot of really wonderful preamble and setting the stage. And one of the themes, or the primary theme that I want to talk to you about is, who are we? What are we made for? And what should we care about? And the reason I ask these various questions about scripture or kings is there's a lot of stuff outside of our control. I would say the vast majority of things are outside of our control and always have been and always will be. And then there's that which we can attend to. And I'm so fascinated by, historically, what we had access to attend to. So in the case of Catholicism, peasant Catholicism, you could not know what was happening in the Vatican. You couldn't read the encyclical because you couldn't read. And you didn't know where the encyclical was. If the Pope died, it might take you a year or two to know that happened. And then when the new one got elected, you didn't know from what cardinals that papacy ascended. And you drove in a car to get here. I flew 1,200 miles to get here. Like, what is happening to what we are? Are we being changed or corrupted by now this rapid adjustment by way of technology? And so I just want to start with and that's why I asked, if we live, what would we be doing as a 27 and a 30-year-old? And let's start with what kind of continuity would we have with our grandparents and our great-grandparents and then our kids? If we go back to the Middle Ages, you and I, how similar is our life to the generations that come before and after us? Is it very similar?
Oh, well, just quickly, the point on the Vatican, not knowing what's going on in the Vatican, I think that's actually kind of interesting because things like that are what led to various heretical movements and also widespread religious reform movements. And I do sometimes, I do this myself, have a tendency to romanticize everything from the past. But I actually feel like now having a better view of what's going on in the Vatican is actually a benefit, because before, if some guy at the village tavern told you, did you hear they're having demonic orgies at the Vatican and the Pope is the Antichrist, it would be like, you've never seen the Pope. You don't know what he's like. He might have, octopus tentacles and goat horns. This is the Middle Ages. Magic is real. It's like, oh my gosh, is that true? Is that really true? And so I think now, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like that clarity, it can be a double-edged sword.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not always the most negative thing, but I think that's one of the big changes in the human psyche is the continuity of generations. In that, if we're just looking at medieval village life, how your average person would have lived, I am growing up in functionally the same world as my parents are and that my children will be growing up in. And the advice that my grandparents give me is still relevant to me now. There would be maybe minor changes, a new type of harness we're using to pull the plow in the field or things like that. But more or less, you'd be growing up in the same world. And the understanding in the medieval Catholic mind, really the medieval Christian mind overall, is that this life is a short test for eternity. So really, you're going through a series of trials and tribulations. You're on this pilgrim's path to salvation. And so life for me and for my kids and for my parents and my grandparents, it's a lot of suffering mixed with a lot of joy, mixed with hardship, mixed with the little laugh you share with your wife, or tousling your kids' hair while you teach them how to cast seeds in the field, and just these little moments mixed with your entire family was just wiped out with a plague, or there's a famine, or the local lord is putting the screws on us with taxation this season, or so. I think there was an understanding that this is going into a bit of a bigger topic, but that God has created this ordered universe, and you have a role in this ordered universe. You're a peasant in this ordered universe, and this is your duty, your thing to do, and that was your parents' duty and your grandparents' duty, and then before them. And it really isn't until like the modern era that we see this idea. This is a bit of a generalization, but just among your average Joe of like, I could go from zero to hero. Like I could get rich, I could become a millionaire. It's F. Scott Fitzgerald who said every American isn't poor, they're a temporarily embarrassed millionaire. Like we're all just one big break away from, whereas the idea of social mobility or that you would ever be anything other than a peasant, it's like God created you in this archetype. You were the peasant archetype, that's your role. You see guys, there's like for those history buffs listening, there's like a Thomas Becket type figure who's born to a poor knight and becomes the Archbishop of Canterbury. There's exemptions, but the reason that they're exemptions is because it was so rare.
So that to me sounds like 1, correct, 2, relieving, and 3, an absolute atrocity against modesty. The development of the idea that you can go from nothing to a noble. Modesty in the sense of you have an office and you should act in accordance with that office. Now, is that true? Like we believe we're all made in the image and likeness of God. And so we all have equal dignity before God. But that's different from office. So are there such things as aristocracy and peasantry? And are we supposed to be able to move?
I mean, it's an interesting question, and I feel like there's no real satisfying earthly answer for it.
Okay.
There are sometimes when you're stuck in traffic or at the grocery store, and you're like, maybe 80% of the population is better for nothing more than pushing the plow. Maybe that's true. Maybe
Didn't
I'm the
Aristotle say
aristocracy.
that?
Maybe I'm the aristocracy. No. But I think part of it too is like what gets forgotten in sort of the historical wash is that although not as common as you might have the opportunity for today, if you were like a member of the peasantry, like a young peasant boy who showed promise, there were paths for you, usually through the church. Like your village priest might spot, that's the kid who memorized all the prayers and he's been really helpful as an altar boy during mass. Like I'm gonna send him to like cathedral school to learn, and then you could rise through church office. So you could start as a peasant boy and end up as an archbishop or somebody who is, there are stories of that for sure. So really for most of the Middle Ages, the church was, it's what's telling you that this is an ordered universe and that this is what, this is the church that's basically translating scripture to you at mass every Sunday or daily mass if that's what you're going to. And it's created this kind of paradigm that you live in where we live in God's ordered universe. Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior, these tenets of the Bible and biblical living and things that we do every day. But also the only way to get out of your station that you were born into for most of the Middle Ages is through the church, paradoxically. But in terms of is there actually an aristocracy? Is there, man, it's a tough question. It's interesting that for so much of human history that would be a very easy question to answer. And even the peasantry would agree. They would say, and it's interesting now, in the late Middle Ages, the merchant class and kind of what we would think of as like the middle class starts to develop. Because before that, there's like two classes. There's the rich and the poor. And then all of a sudden there's kind of like this urban, city-dwelling, bourgeois, like merchants, textile workers. And
when did that happen?
This is like late. It starts to happen in the high middle, so like 1000 to 1100.
Okay.
And then like really starts to kick off in England and France and the Holy Roman Empire, like 1400. There starts to be trade opened up post-Crusades with like the Holy Land and connection to the Silk Road, and all of a sudden like mass communication gets a little bit easier. But anyway, so these guys who become rich and then all they want, like basically they were poor, they got a little bit of money, and now all they want to do is imitate the aristocracy.
Right.
Which is really interesting.
Well, that's exactly what happens to us.
Yeah, it's the same thing, yeah.
Somebody escapes the middle class.
Yeah.
And the instant they do.
Designer clothes,
sports cars, big house.
Yeah, it's the American dream.
Hiring other people. So it's like we just become aristocrats.
Right.
We will hire people to do things that a year ago, 5 years ago, we were doing. We were washing the dishes. We were washing our clothes. We were cleaning our small house. We were doing all these things. The instant anybody gets any kind of money, it's who can I pay to do all this?
Yeah.
And then let me sell a course to tell other people how you can become
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I think, I don't know, the question of like whether or not there should be an aristocracy or there's a peasantry or whatever is almost second to me of like, is that just how we are in human nature? Like, is that just how human nature organizes the world? Like how we kind of see things that some people are meant for this and some people are meant for that. And I don't know. It's interesting. I just did this video about billionaires, and I was
Yeah.
going all the way back through history, and that all the way since like ancient, like the oldest cuneiform tablets already talk about like a landed gentry, an aristocracy that has most of the money,
Yeah.
and the vast majority of people are like peasant farmers and workers, and that's just how society is.
Yeah.
And you wonder, I mean, that is kind of in a way how it is now, and I
Yeah.
feel like also what's with like the rise of techno-feudalism, and I mean, there's a million different directions to go there, but it seems like those who are rich would prefer that we go back to the two classes, the
Right.
rich, and then the vast majority of like subsistence living.
Yeah.
And the middle class is kind of a threat to that. I mean, there's a lot to be said there, but
well, I think people conflate merit with office,
Mhm.
and they think that you merit your office, and that's not how I think it, at least as Catholics, we believe nature is set up. So the patriarchy exists. It exists both spiritually and naturally. And like fathers are ordained by God to lead a family. And that has nothing to do with whether or not the father is a good man. That's just the office that God created when he created creation, to be redundant. And so I think people think they hear the idea of an aristocracy and they go, well, they're no better than me. If not, a lot of times they're worse. They're less virtuous. They're more prone to their impulses. And it's like, well, I wonder if that's not relevant to the conversation. I wonder if the answer is whether or not there's a class created in reality by God. And it is interesting that Jesus says, slaves, obey your masters and render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. You know, like Christ doesn't come and say, actually, there are no classes, and that we should level the playing field. I think it's in Romans. It says to, submit to the government, basically, at least to some degree.
Yeah.
That it's moral to submit yourself to the government that's present there. And then St. Paul says, like, wives, submit to your husbands. Not obey the good man.
And husbands, submit to your wives. That part always gets left out. That's true. Isn't that the second half of that?
No.
Okay.
Ephesians 5 is often contested.
Okay.
I actually just recently made a whole movie about specifically Ephesians 5. Mutual submission does not mean that husbands should submit their will to the wife, because otherwise you have no head of the household. So there is headship, there is patriarchy. It's husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. So wives, submit to your husbands. Husbands, love your wives, which is to say, lay down your life for her. But it does not mean that he should surrender authorities. Because if you have no authority, then Aquinas talks about, like, you need basically a tiebreaker. Otherwise, you have gridlock. Nothing actually gets done. You can't make decisions. And so God ordained, man to head the households. Where was I going with that, though? Do you remember where I started with that?
The idea that the personal traits of somebody has nothing to do with the value of what they bring to the class.
And the relevance of this is it helps to know who and what we are in order to know, like, what should we spend our calories pursuing. Like, recently I've been really questioning, like, should anyone really try to scale a company to $100 million? Not inherit a kingdom, right? If you're the child of a aristocrat, then you just get it. You didn't have to scale it. But, like, what has to change in a man to go from nothing to I'm worth, if you're Elon Musk, close to $1 trillion? What must Elon Musk do and become to have a net worth of almost $1 trillion? Does he have to corrupt himself to do that? And then when we, as just the laity, look at that and try to orient every action throughout our day, I'm going to make content online so I can scale my business. So I. Like, what are you becoming? And that's why I want to know about, like, where were we for the first however many thousands of years? And were we closer to what we are?
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting point about, and I've seen people talking about this, the hustle cultureification of everything in our lives. Whereas even your hobbies, like like one of my big hobbies is reading. I do a lot of research for my videos. And so I had a Goodreads account, which is where you track the books that you're reading, and I would have my YouTube followers follow me on there.
Okay.
And then for me, it became a hustle cultureification because I want to show that I'm reading the biggest, wordiest books, and I'm reading them super fast. And like now I have authority, and look at how many books I'm reading and how great and smart I am. And I realized like I'm not even enjoying the process of reading the book, and I'm not even absorbing as much information as I should because I'm trying to hustle culture this. And it's the same thing anytime I say to a friend or something like, oh, I've taken up whatever hobby. I've taken up running. I've taken up this. I've taken up that. It's like, dude, you should turn that into a side hustle. Like, you should set up an Etsy shop and sell your t-shirts on Etsy. And it's like, no, dude, I just want to like do this for myself. So I think that's an interesting point. And I think for most of human history, and I just finished a video yesterday kind of along the same lines of medieval mental health. It's a video about neurodivergence in the Middle Ages, ADD and autism, and do we see these traits in famous figures from the Middle Ages, and how are they thought of? And it's interesting, in a time before what we would think of as like modern post-industrial capitalism, your worth isn't necessarily tied to your 9 to 5 like output. And I think just part of what we've internalized is that even now, I maybe it's I grew up Dutch Protestant, and it's part of the Protestant work ethic, and it's like, you are only worth as much as you can put out. And if I'm sitting still doing nothing, even if I'm reading a book, which for me is productive because it's for my video, it's just like, I should be like also walking on a treadmill while I read this. Like it just doesn't feel like enough. Like it's gotten like, I'll be sitting watching a movie and I'm like, I should be working on a script instead of watching this movie, you know? So I think there's something really interesting to be said there. I also feel like, just kind of separately, there was an interesting point you made, and this is something I've been very fascinated by, about the personality versus the office, or the personal traits versus the office, because this was a huge debate in medieval Catholicism, and really medieval Christianity from the very beginning was the priests themselves, or the clerics, do their personal traits, like their personal sins and their habits and the things they do that are wrong, have anything to do with what we should think of them as priests, or their power to intercede and be priests for us. And this goes all the way back to I believe it's pronounced Donatist heresy in the 4th century, which is basically that nobody should have any power or be part of the church unless they are living a holy life. And the reason that came about was because there had been these, what's the word?
Scandals?
No, like these purges of Christians by the Romans. What's the word? Persecutions of Christians. And during that time, to escape the persecution, a lot of Christians had to renounce their faith publicly and say, I don't believe in Jesus Christ. Like sometimes they would have to step on a picture, like a drawn icon of Jesus. And so after the persecutions were over, those Christians wanted to come back to church on Sunday. And the Christians in the church would say like, no, you denied Christ. And so you don't get to come back. And that was Donatism, that you, like, there are rules for what it means to be a Christian. If you break those rules, you're cast out, and that's it.
Forget about Peter?
I know, exactly. Or,
who became Pope
7 times that, or like how many times do I forgive you? But it was a big heresy that had to be quashed in early Christianity, and it came back a lot with various heresies in the Middle Ages.
It feels like it's back now.
Yeah, it is definitely a puritanical streak.
Absolutely.
A lot of the medieval heretics, like the Cathars, were the early kind of predecessors of who became the Puritans. But basically the idea was, it's 12th century France, you're in your village, you know your village priest has a girlfriend, and you know he has 3 bastard children that he's like giving special privileges in church to, and it's making you mad. And here you are praying and fasting and observing the liturgical calendar, and here's the guy who's supposed to be the servant of Christ, and he's not doing any of that. And it makes you start thinking, and it develops into these 2 strains. One, which was anti-clericalism, which is that those who are our current clerics are not doing their job properly, need to be replaced with those who will. And then the other strain, which was anti-sacerdotalism, I believe is how it's pronounced, which is we shouldn't have priests at all. I should have a direct relationship with God. And that's proto-Protestantism.
Got it.
But it's basically comes down to the idea of, do the personal traits matter in the office? And even now, it's like the Pope might say or do something I don't agree with, but the Pope is the Pope. Like, he's been given that office by God. He's the vicar of Christ. And it's, some things, I don't know. I do feel like also ego and control are really the great disease of 20th and 21st century Western civilization. And I do feel like a refusal to ever admit that we're wrong about anything. Because how could I possibly imagine that maybe something the Pope says that I disagree with, maybe he's right and I'm wrong?
I've had to go through that a lot recently. A buddy of mine, Will Noland, actually, it was funny. This is back when... Francis was still with us, and it was just like reflecting on, well, he said this or he did this. And I remember Will was like kind of sharing some of the things that Francis posted. And you could consider Will to be, you know, more on the side of traditionalism, depending on how you look at his content. He goes, yeah, because he's the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think maybe God did something to ordain him?
Mm-hmm.
And even if not, like, do you think that it's your job, you, the layperson, to Da Vinci code this?
Mm-hmm. Start your own denomination.
and I don't know, but guess what? I don't have to. I think that's the true beauty of Catholicism, is the difference between me and the ordained, and like what my role is. Like, roles are a safe haven if you have just a modicum of humility.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't actually have to be a priest. I get to be the person who receives the sacraments, and I don't have to know this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I worry that academia or the academic inclinations, like if you look at all on Twitter about basically any subject, but especially Catholicism, there's sort of an expectation that you know all of how this stuff works. Like, you can defend against orthodoxy and all the Protestant heresies and understand Catholic apologetics. And I just kind of got exhausted with that, because my reversion had nothing to do with intellectualism.
Mm-hmm.
I was an atheist. I raised Catholic, atheist, came back to the faith. It had nothing to do with intellectualism. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, that's so freeing that I can just receive the sacraments and focus on my personal relationship with Jesus Christ, mm-hmm. to use a very Protestant phrase.
Yeah.
And that's actually what I'm called to do. I'm not called to chastise the bishops publicly. I'm not called to critique the Pope. Mm-hmm. I actually don't even have to read what he says.
Yeah.
Pretty sure, right? Like, I'm not, that's theologically correct. Like, I don't have to read the encyclicals of the Pope. Is that true?
Yeah, as far as I know. And also, what's great about Catholics is that we have anything that the Pope says. We not only have scripture, we have like patristic tradition, we have the catechism. Like, you can test anything he says against.
Yeah.
We have like hard. That's, you know, I was going to Protestant church for a long time, and it's like Pastor Tom can say anything from the pulpit.
Yeah.
He can really take any one sentence from scripture and twist it any way he wants, and you can walk out of there with a totally muddled idea of Christian teaching or values. Whereas like with Catholics, it's like we have a pretty robust set of traditions that you can test anything that's being said against, anything your priest says on Sunday or anything the Pope says against this, and see if it holds water.
So was it your deep dive into the history that brought you to Across the Tiber?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I kind of went through the same thing. I grew up Protestant, going to Sunday school, and fell away from it as a teenager, and then was agnostic or atheist. It was interesting. I don't know if you were the same way. For many years in my late teens and early 20s, if you had asked me, if I believed in God, I would have been confused. It just, I'd never entered my head. Okay. I wasn't like a militant, like Reddit atheist or anything. Yeah. But it just never really, were you like really anti?
I was very militant.
Okay.
Very militant. I wrote about it. I would proselytize. Okay. I would try to debate everybody.
You sound just like my friend Scotty, and then now he's like a hardcore, because you're a militant atheist and then a militant Christian, like you switch over.
Yeah. Well, and you can really stress test what you believe.
Yeah.
Now, like, I feel like I can really do the debates and understand it, but I also don't want to, because I wouldn't say there's good reasons to be an atheist, because I do believe that if you apply reason, you will arrive at the logos. Mm-hmm. But there's good arguments, and you can be lost in that. For me, it was 7 years. I was lost in that. Mm-hmm. Thousands of hours of podcasts, books that you can read. You can confuse yourself.
Yeah.
And I also believe in the hound of heaven. I think God will send his own out after you. Mm-hmm. If he wants you, he'll get you. And when your time's right, he'll come and get you.
Yeah.
And that's what it was for me. I feel like for me, the way I describe it is I just lost the fight against the church. Mm-hmm. It felt like the church was just sort of this looming oppressive presence. And at one point in time, I just broke and I gave up.
Yeah.
Which is such a weird thing, because you think, well, the church is passive, but like, I actually do think that it's a force. And if it really was just like facts and logic or whatever, that wouldn't be true. There wouldn't be power that compels your soul. And I really feel that with the Catholic Church, that like it's exhausting to fight against it. And people who fight long enough, I think with sufficient grace, they basically end up just coming home.
Yeah. After I came out of my agnosticism, I started exploring Protestantism and got involved with some local churches. I was living in Boston at the time. And I've always like kind of wanted to put content out in some way.
Yeah.
And that's where it sort of started. I had a blog called John's Apologetics. I don't think it exists anymore, but it was a Protestant apologetics blog against Catholic teaching.
Wow.
Like, this is why confession's nonsense. This is why all these things, why you don't need a priest, all these things. And then in 2022, my grandfather passed away quite suddenly. And I just went to a shrine in my neighborhood in Boston just to light a candle for him, even though I didn't believe in any of that Catholic nonsense. I just felt like, and he wasn't Catholic either. He was a hardcore Dutch Reformed Protestant his whole life, but it just felt right, you know?
Yeah.
And I went in there and the quiet and the solitude of the church, and there were a couple people kneeling in the pews, praying rosaries. It was like off hours. And just that like faded sense of smell of incense. Like it's not quite there, but it's like that thick air. And I don't know, it was like a physical sensation of just like, I've crossed the veil into something else. Like I was on the sidewalk in Boston and now I've crossed over into some like liminal space between earth and heaven. I got home and like Googled Catholicism and started just with a completely clean slate. And just started reading.
Yeah.
But it wasn't even the intellectual arguments. Those were powerful.
Yeah.
But I think it was the experience of Mass, the experience of praying the Rosary, and even I've always been, the great thing about Catholicism, this is Bishop Robert Barron says something along these lines, but that in 2,000 years, very little has been thrown out. Like the umbrella of Catholicism is very wide. So you can have a very intellectual Thomas Aquinas Catholicism, or you can have like a Meister Eckhart, like very mystical vision, like physical, tactile Catholicism too. And those two things are both Catholicism. They're not at odds with each other at all. And so that was something that was very, very interesting to me, that it was such a broad umbrella. And I feel like that's how God, if I believe in a God and I believe in a loving God who is involved in our lives here on earth, he can't be a small God. He has to be as big as I can possibly imagine and as wide as I can possibly imagine and beyond my imagination. So I have to imagine that God's tradition would be a wide embrace. You know, if you're more into the emotional and the mystic and you like to go to adoration and you feel something from that, or if you want to read the Summa Theologica and that's what gets you off, and like you like are really into theology and that's how you feel close to God, there's a place for you in the Catholic Church, no matter who you are. And I think that's kind of what brought me in, because I didn't really feel that with Pastor Todd.
Which is so funny, because you would think that the diversity of Protestantism is the ecumenism that you just described. That it would throw the wider net. Yeah. Because we have 40,000 denominations. And you could just pick your own. Yeah,
you want to hear something interesting that I noticed? Because I was like deep in, I was very involved with a couple Protestant churches over the course of like several years in Boston. And it really is, I think what's so interesting about Catholicism, even if you're like plugged into the community, even if you're like hanging out with people after Mass and you're in a youth group and you're like really involved with the church, I at least have never felt in Catholic circles, like I think just because we have confession and communion and like these means of like penance and like a restitution with God, that it's like there's much less judgment. I know people talk about Catholic guilt, and maybe it's because I'm an adult convert that I don't have that really. And I understand it, people go to Catholic school and whatever, but I've always felt the opposite, that there's less judgment in Catholic circles and less guilt. Yeah. Whereas in Protestantism, in the circles I ran in, like evangelical non-denominational Protestantism, it's all, there's no sacraments. So it's all about your personal holiness. It's the Donatist heresy. So it's like, dude, I was involved with this crazy church in Boston when I first got there. I didn't know what I'd gotten into, but it was extremely puritanical. Yeah. And if you Google the name of the church, which I never did until like 6 months in, it autofills with cult at the end. It was a legit cult that they were like recruiting kids into. No. And it was, if you could only date girls in the church, and they would choose. The church leaders it was like Mormonism. They would choose your date, and then chaperone would have to come with you. And they wanted you to break your lease on your apartment and come live in the commune. And they wanted you to quit your job and come. Dude, it was like nuts. Wow. But it's like, if you are in a small group Bible study with a discipler who's got your best interests at heart, and there's no 2,000 years of intellectual tradition,
Yeah.
you can take any sentence out of the Bible and be like, see,
Yeah.
this is why you need a chaperone on your date. This is what God says about. So I don't know. It's just, I think just living through those experiences, having to exit a cult, these things, kind of just opened my eyes to like, oh, tradition's important. Intellectualism is important. So is the emotional, mystical side of the faith. And yeah.
Just to shake up the snow globe then, so where do you fall? Do you have any hot takes on traditionalism versus maybe post-Vatican II-ism? I don't know how you describe the new mass, but where do you fall on all that?
Yeah, I feel like I talk a lot about the history of Catholicism on my channel.
Yeah.
And I feel like my take on this it'll probably lose me some followers, but
Okay.
I'm not pro or anti. I feel like however you want to engage with the church, like if you really love TLM and you veil and you love it and it's there, like that's great. I feel like like I'm saying, like God has to be enormous beyond our imagination.
Yeah.
So the fact that I'll see like these Catholics online who are almost acting like God isn't present at the Novus Ordo. He's only present at the TLM.
Some people think it's sinful. They say it is. They say it's not the mass.
Yeah. Mel Gibson's a big.
I know it hurts my heart.
I know.
Because
I
the
love
Passion.
I love Apocalypto. He's great. But
I mean, the Passion was the greatest piece of cinema to ever come out, and he's with. I'm not sure what the bishop is or the priest. Who's the priest that he was just pictured with? And
it's that. What's that thing called where you don't believe that the
SSPX?
Yes, but there's a term for it where you don't believe that the Pope.
Sedevacantism.
Yes, he's a sedevacantist. Yeah,
yes,
which is disappointing.
So I derailed you. Keep going. God is big enough.
If you feel God present I mean, who am I to say anyway? But I don't know. I just sometimes feel. I mean, I also. It creates kind of this like tribalism, I think, in some senses.
Absolutely.
And where it makes it so you're not willing to take things in from other faith traditions. Like I just read this book called The Way of the Pilgrim. It's an Orthodox Russian Russian Orthodox Christian story of this like unnamed 19th century pilgrim and his quest to like become closer to Christ. And if you like were to listen to some of these traditional Catholics, it's like that's Orthodox heresy and you should have nothing to do with it. But reading it and like understanding his sort of mysticism and the whole book is him having conversations with different holy men about how to become closer to God and how to walk the holy path as described in scripture. And it's like, this is as Catholic as any Catholic thing I've ever read. So I don't know, it can create a little bit of that tribalism. And then I've just seen in my own personal life that some of the greatest Catholics, this is my hottest take.
Yeah.
Some of the greatest Catholics I know have never stepped foot in a church.
Tell me more.
Some of the most selfless, compassionate, Christ-like people I know have never been to mass. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a universalist. I don't think everybody ends up in heaven.
Sure.
I don't think, I mean, just based on the catechism, I don't think any of us can know who ends up where. But it's just, I try to read a good chunk of the New Testament each day. Okay. And the more I kind of internalize, the more I'm like, this is all very important. And this is all, but I don't know. I have a difficult time. I don't know. I feel like I've already stepped on the toes of a lot of Catholics with that one, but these are just my opinions. But that's not to say that this isn't an opinion on who's saved or who isn't, or the importance of all of these things are important. But some of the people I most see in my life imitating Christ might not even know.
That should be instead of somebody hearing that and throwing the book at you. I think that should be an indictment on the TLM goers, the Novus Ordo.
It's Pharisaic, I think,
and say, okay, well, how come John doesn't see that in me? I go to the TLM. Why doesn't John see in me this Christ-likeness? Right.
Well, if the outside of the cup is clean, but the inside is dirty, then, Yeah. So it's like, you might go to TLM and you might, pray 5 rosaries a day and do all these things, but it's like, you could also have no.
Yeah.
I don't know.
For what? I think it was St. Philip Neri who warned against doing penances, and maybe it was specifically during Lent, but he was like, don't do any penance that makes you less charitable to your family. You're not the guy. You're not that big. You don't have that level of virtue, which we just keep seeing these parables over and over again in scripture, the man who beats his chest and prays in public versus the guy who goes in his closet quietly. Like, if you are doing all of these performative acts of religion and you have none of the fruits of the Spirit, then maybe it requires a reexamination. And I think ideally, the person, I mean, not ideally, we are commanded to follow the precepts of the church and attend Mass on Sundays and so on. But if you idolize the form of the sacrament, I say form not in the sense of like the form and matter. I mean like the structure, the appearance of the sacrament, as opposed to the effects of the sacrament and what it's calling you to do, then we have to be confused about that.
Right. It's, I mean, like you said, so many kind of instances and scenes from the New Testament. For example, why are you healing on the Sabbath?
Right.
You know, these things
Right.
where it's like, well, you didn't follow the rules. And Jesus' whole thing is like, it's not about the rules. It's about the humanity behind it and the soul behind it. And I think what's most interesting to me is this idea of Meister Eckhart. I've mentioned him a couple of times, but he's this 14th century German mystic, Catholic mystic, who I absolutely love his teachings. And you read some of his writings and it feels so modern, but his whole thing is that spiritual life is not a process of addition. Like more this, more that, more tradition, more this, more elaborate robes and more, and those things are all great. And if they lead your mind towards God, different people, different strokes for different folks. But he said the true spiritual path that Jesus Christ is advocating for in the New Testament is a process of subtraction.
Yeah.
If there's two words that I think the gospel can be summed up as, it's let go.
Yeah.
Like let go, like you have to die to yourself. You have to pick up your cross and carry it daily. Yeah. Like it's, I don't know. I think it's like the whole gospel teaching, it's not easy to live, but it's quite simple.
Yeah.
Like it's seek first the kingdom of God. Jordan Peterson had a great lecture on this, but basically saying, always set your sights on the highest ideal.
Yeah.
And try and do the next right thing. And what Jesus is talking about, the kingdom of heaven is within you. You'll develop like a God consciousness. Like you'll realize what that next right thing is. And you'll kind of find yourself in alignment with God's will. It's a really interesting, very mystical process that I think sometimes we're so post-enlightenment, rational, like that we just want it to be given to us in bullet points. Like we want it ChatGPT to us. Like what's my 5 a.m. morning routine to wake up and figure out how to get closer to God? And it's like, it's a walk. It's a walk. It's a walk. It's a process. It's a lifelong process. It's also a lack of, I think, in the modern world, like patience. That's something that our medieval ancestors would have had. Yeah. They would have viewed their life as like a refining process, the way you would refine a metal to turn it into something else. Like you are being refined in the fire. I think I've heard actually even more modern Catholic teachers speak on this, but it's like your soul is like the flame that's referenced in the Bible, the fire that you see, like a lot of times it's meant purifying, not to burn things down and destroy them, but to purify them the way that like you would stick a sword into the fire to get the germs, or you put something in boiling water to kill the germs. Like it's a purifying process. And so I don't know, these things that we go through on a daily basis. Now I'm going off on like 50 different tangents, but it's I don't know. It's the whole point, the whole beauty of life is that on this path, you walk through the flames.
Well, I think we've pissed everybody off in every camp, so let's keep going.
Yeah.
I want answers, and I'm going to put you on the spot with a few things, and I won't hold you to any of your answers, but I would definitely say that you have an expertise of anthropology that the vast majority of people don't have, because when you study where we came from, what we paid attention to, the behaviors that we had, you get more of a purchase on an anthropology than I think the vast majority of modern people have, especially when you're talking about where we came from a religious and like a Western civilization standpoint, not just, I don't, do the whole evolutionary psychology thing. So what are we for? It sounds like what you just said is that for the vast majority of human history, we believed that life was, the purpose of our life was to refine ourselves in communion with God such that on the day we die, we make it into paradise. We're worthy of paradise. Would you refine that at all? Would you agree with that?
I think I'm going to catch heat. It's all right. It's all right. I think the great failure of medieval Catholicism that has kind of been inherited by us in modern Catholicism, again, because I talk about historical, traditional medieval Catholicism, in a way that's a little bit romantic because it is cool. It's dope. It's, you got the Crusades, you got holy martyrs and cathedrals, and it's cool. But it's like, that's just because something's old doesn't mean it's good or that we need to go back to it. And I think one of the things that medieval Catholicism did wrong, and for reasons that made sense sociologically, is that it pushed salvation to the next life in a way that I don't necessarily think is totally biblically accurate.
Okay.
I think there's an eternal salvation, of course, that's talked about, that we're all aware of. That's what we already know of. But that there's a salvation of the heart that we should be seeking on a daily basis right now, today. And there's like some, I don't know if you'd call them heretical, but like beliefs that salvation is like a state, there is no eternal salvation. Salvation is a state of mind, and it's a state of inner peace. And like, it's kind of pulled from like some Eastern traditions, and you'll hear like some Catholic teachers talk about things like that. And that's not necessarily what I'm saying, but just that what you see in medieval Catholicism is this idea that you are accomplishing a list of things. You're giving alms to the poor. You're going on a pilgrimage. You're going to crusade in the Holy Land so that you can assure yourself a seat in heaven.
Yeah.
And it sort of kicks the can down the road of trying to improve anything here from a social perspective. So that would be the failure, I think. But then the silver lining of that is no matter what the motivation it is giving alms to the poor is a good thing. Like taking time out of volunteering your time to help build the village cathedral is a good thing. Like it like conditions you to think selflessly, even if the initial motivation was, I want a seat in heaven. If it reflects in all these great deeds that you end up doing, it's like the juice was kind of worth the squeeze in that regard. So that's not a condemnation of medieval Catholicism, but I think now we've inherited the idea that salvation is purely, like, it's not something we should be concerning ourselves with on a day-to-day basis, or if it is, it's just what we can do to assure ourselves that seat in heaven. And we've divorced ourselves from all the things that medieval Catholics thought that they had to do to reach that. And like, faith without works is dead. This is, of course, a huge Protestant Catholic. Do you need good works and faith and whatever? But I mean, what medieval Catholics recognized that it wasn't the failure of medieval Catholicism is that there are things you need to be doing on a daily basis, to like die to yourself and that reflect your faith. Like if you're not giving alms to the poor, you're not, it doesn't matter if you go to mass. It doesn't matter if you go to confession. Like if you're not, helping the sick guy in your village and taking him into your house for a week to help him recover, like you're not doing your Christian duty, because Jesus says, however you treat the least of these is how you treat me. And this is something that's like living in the mind and psyche of your average medieval Catholic. And it's interesting to us, like when we say we're religious and you look at somebody from the 10th century who says they're religious, it's not the same. The closest we can get in the modern day to like how somebody in the 10th century thought of religion, like even a Catholic, like a French Catholic in the 10th century would be like a jihadist. Like this is somebody who is willing to, they will die for their faith right now today. It's that real. Like heaven is as real as the sky is blue. Yeah. So it's not intellectual assent. It's like, this is the water I swim in. Asking a medieval Catholic if they believe in God is like asking you if you believe in the ocean. Like, what are you talking about? Of course.
I've swam in it.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. It's our concept of religion. And
so much good there. But the big signal point for me is cosmology. Mm-hmm. They knew where they were.
Mm-hmm. And where they were going. And this goes back to what you're saying about the archetypes, but like up was God, down was hell. This is the plane that we're all inhabiting. And it was so much more Lord of the Rings than like Lord of the Rings is a ephemeral distillation of what everyone actually lived on a day-to-day basis and bled for it. I submit for your consideration that it was technology, not exclusively, but largely, which completely subverted our understanding of who and what we are and where we are in the narrative. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that? Definitely. I think it's, technology has been, just looking at like social media specifically, and I think kind of anybody on any side of the social or political spectrum would agree with this, it's the greatest sower of confusion. It was the same thing when the printing press was implemented in late medieval Europe. It's like all of a sudden anybody can print a pamphlet saying anything. Yeah. And up until that point, the written word was, like we talked about earlier, like if something was written down, that was fact. So now suddenly everybody can print a pamphlet. I'm reading something that might be totally made up, but it's written down, so it's a fact. I still have that medieval mindset, even though the printing press exists now. So it's the same thing with, I think we're very conditioned to understand things or absorb things that we think come from some position of authority.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy to pretend you have authority on the internet. And so it's a great sower of confusion. And then, like you said, the medieval mind had a very clear idea of the hierarchy of the heavens and earth and where they were in it. But also, I don't know, this is something I've kind of landed in different directions on, but like, obviously this is a time before like real scientific progress as there's no Isaac Newton, there's no laws of gravity, there's no understanding of like thermodynamics. So it's like, if you were to tell me that a guy 3 villages over could levitate,
yeah, there's
no law of gravity in my head to tell me, you know what I mean? Like, imagine a world where any law we know about nature doesn't, like, that's not ingrained in people. There's an inherent mysticism. Like, there are fairies in the forest. And
I'll push back on that slightly, and maybe we're saying the same thing. If you tell me that the earth is flat and the sun and the moon revolve around the earth and there's a firmament, it's like, wow, that's absurd. But then you go, actually, it's a ball and the water sticks on the outside of it and it's spinning through space and it's held together by this magical invisible force called gravity.
Right.
There's no difference.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the point I'm getting to. Yeah, it's we call these things by different names now. Like, if I throw a ball in the air and it falls, I can say that's because of, but it's like, I don't know, that it's a really interesting phenomenon to me. I think I've seen people in my comment section be like, man, if I could get a time machine, I'd go back to the Middle Ages, I'd be a king, you know? And it's like, you couldn't even like, you don't even understand how your car works. Like, you don't even understand how any of this works. And I think that's also, I mean, something like a medieval peasant would know that the earth wasn't flat. And yet we've come full circle in the age of the internet and technology back to believing, people legitimately believing the earth is flat. And I think sometimes with technology as the sower of confusion, information can be like a fire hose. And it's like, when there's so much information, it's, I don't know. I go both ways on this. One, because in the 20th century, there's like a few television networks and newspapers that control all of the information you are allowed to see. And now you can see everything. And I feel like both paradigms are not really correct. There has to be some middle ground. But yeah, it's funny that we've kind of come, I feel like that was sort of the genesis of my channel idea, that we've come back to thinking in a very medieval way.
Because you can't help it. Like it did this and then it collapsed.
Yeah, it's like the meme of the guy on both ends of the spectrum. Yeah, because I think first of all, we've like lost trust in all institutions, basically. Second of all, there's no like central establishment of like intellectual authority. So in the Middle Ages, it would have been the church, and even by the late Middle Ages, that was kind of starting to falter. And now it's like, in the age of like TikTok, Instagram Reels, like whoever you swiped on last, whatever you heard last. I know people in my personal life who will not be named that the last thing they heard on Instagram Reels is now their worldview. And I think a lot of people are like naturally like that. We like to think we're, you know, adults, but really we have the mind of children. You know, we're running around with the same impulses and fears and traumas we had when we were kids, and we're affected by the things we hear. So yeah, I think in a weird way, a lack of information created the medieval mindset. And then we got like some information and it brought us into like the modern mindset. And now we're almost in like the postmodern mindset, going back to whatever the guy said at the local tavern is true, because there's no established.
Well, that almost seems like that there's first principles that you can't reduce past, and then you can try to build on them. But if you build a Tower of Babel, ultimately, like the languages are going to be confused again, and you're just going to go right back to first principles. Where like pragmatism, I'm going to believe what I can see. I'm going to act on the data that I have. And you're going to try to tell me something. Maybe you're wearing a white lab coat. Maybe you're a scientist. Maybe you're a government worker or whatever. I'm going to say, screw you. I'm not listening to you. Like, we have to wrest control. It's almost like intellectual subsidiarity, right? You have the Catholic social teaching of subsidiarity. Let's restrict power to where it is has the greatest effect, and that's an aspect of justice. It's unjust to try to control things far away from the source of their effect. And I think that we are kind of getting back to that intellectually and relationally as well, where, okay, we pushed it too far. We built the Tower of Babel, and it's caused all sorts of problems. So there's almost like a defensiveness here. We were promised, I think, community with the internet. We were promised comity and amity with all these other people, and we didn't find it. We recreated factions anyway. Now the internet is just infinity factions of people. And now that's like feudalism again, basically.
Yeah. Well, I feel like community, for something to be a community, that's a really interesting point about communities on the internet. I've heard people in my comment section in different YouTube videos comparing like, well, the internet's kind of like a smattering of like medieval guilds. You know, you have your Pokemon people, you have your furries, you have your whatever, and like these are all the guilds, and we're all like a beautiful medieval patchwork. And I think what's interesting to consider about community in human history is the community is defined by what it is and what it isn't. Like there are clear boundaries in the community. And it was interesting in the course of this, of my research process for this medieval autism neurodivergence video, I was talking to somebody who I know who works in the autism field. And he was talking about this book that had come out. I think it's called Unmasking Autism. It was like a famous book. It came out not too long ago. And it was very controversial because it basically said autism is whatever you define it as. It's kind of what started this whole trend of everybody in the internet saying, actually, I'm self-diagnosing as autistic, ADD, bipolar, whatever. And it's like all of these things lose meaning in the, like these words lose meaning. Even the word community itself, I feel like I can turn on the TV and see 50 political ads about he's bringing back the community or whatever. It's like these words start to lose their, so it's like even like a very clinical term, like autism, I started to lose its, like, what does that even mean if autism can be whatever you define it as? So I think it is kind of going back to the idea of, I don't know, is it possible to open the umbrella too wide? Or is it possible to make the boundaries too loose and too porous? And by nature, does that mean someone's always on the outside? You know what I mean? Because I think we're all about inclusivity and you know, everybody, but is it like a component of human nature, and I'm not saying it is or it isn't, that there always has to be a fringe? There always has to be, like, the community cannot extend to everybody. I don't know.
Well, is there a self?
Yeah.
That would be the first boundary. And I think as Catholics, we believe that there are individual souls, there's individual selves. So there's a me and there's not a we, there's a me and everybody else. That would probably be like the first concentric circle. And it is interesting that like the Eastern faiths say, no, there isn't. It's pantheism, right? Me in the chair and you and the sun are all the same. We are one with the universe and there are no boundaries. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that is one of the distinctions. So Gutenberg, big inflection point. I want to try to, if we can, rate these as if they were bombs in terms of like megatons of destructive force in our history. Can you compare Gutenberg printing press to the car in terms of how it affected us?
It's an interesting question. I mean, in terms of things that completely shift the paradigm of, because if you look at something like the car, even just in American history, it's like completely influenced our urban infrastructure, our city planning, all these, even like how we think of ourselves as individuals and the whole like American maverick. And, you know, when you're not riding public transport every day, that's allowed to germinate in your mind. I think it's interesting with the printing press. I don't know. It's easy, I think, naturally to have like a historical sense of black and white, of this thing did this or did that, or something like the Crusades. Like it was all this, it was all that. And I see people using the Crusades for different ends, like for political purposes. And it's the same thing. The printing press, again, it's like without the printing press, would there have been a Reformation, for example?
Seems impossible.
I think in retrospect, we tend to think of things as historically inevitable. Like X and Y happened, so Z had to happen. But I don't necessarily, like, you look at, it was different in different parts of Europe, but like something like late medieval English Catholicism was forcefully removed. That was not an organic movement towards Reformation. That was forcefully removed by Henry VIII and his beef with the Pope. And like late medieval English Catholicism was like a rich, vibrant faith. So there's these questions of like, with Gutenberg and with the printing press as well, the first things that kind of disseminated from the printing press was Catholic teachings. Like the printing press was used
Right.
to print books of the hours, cheap books of the hours, so the
Yeah.
peasantry can now bring those to church and understand what was being said and
Yeah.
pray the liturgical hours and whatever. So it was like, okay, I mean, the original impulse of it was so that we can get more things in the hands of more people. And it's like, I mean, I could take my car to come here, or I could drive my car into like a crowd of people in Buckhead, and like, you know, so it's like, I don't know, it's these things, it's the same thing as like atomic energy. It's, you know, in the hands of the wrong people, it can cause untold destruction, but it can also power a city.
Well, the question that's overlaying all of this is, does technology move us closer or away from God? And some people make the argument, well, technology is neutral, and it's explicitly what we use it for. So a car could take you places, or it could hurt people in a crowd. Pope Leo, to go back on my own word and start acknowledging that I did listen to what the Pope said, pushes back on that. And he says, well, no, the people who architect and finance and direct technology make technology not neutral. And I share this view. I think that specificity dictates the moral weight of technology. So I'll give you an example. A 2x4 has many, many, many uses, but a medieval torture rack has one use: to torture. And so it would be very silly to say, well, a torture rack's just a torture rack. It depends on how you use it, because it has one purpose, and it's to cause maximal suffering for somebody. So when we look at the printing press, the question that just fascinates me as somebody who did make a technology to constrain technology is, should we just operate in the middle, or are we like trying to jam the stick back all the way in the other direction and say none of it? We want none of it. It was all bad. Every time we did something, it just made things worse. And our whole project of life, if we really want to get closer to God, is to just get all of it off of our plates. And that's why I'm asking about the printing press. That's why I'm asking about all these things. It's like, when we go back, do things get better, or is that a fallacy?
Have you talked to Catholic AI? Have you seen these?
Like Truthfully and Magisterium AI?
Yeah, these AI Catholic.
I've used both. Well, I've used Magisterium AI.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I love AI, but I love it because it allows me to do what I do, which is to destroy technology.
Right.
I mean, I go round and round on this all day, but personally, I'm absolutely thrilled by AI.
Yeah, no, I'm pro. I use AI usually for SEO.
Right.
You know, tell me what keywords to put to help the algorithm, because the algorithm itself I'm like using the algorithm to manipulate the algorithm. So it's been helpful for me before, but I find like for creative pursuits, it's not very, I don't know. I don't really use it for, I struggle to see the use case for like the creation of an image or video. And it almost feels like your analogy with the torture rack. It's like, there's no real good, like AI helping me to fill out a spreadsheet faster, or telling me what keywords to put into my YouTube description to help the algorithm pick it up. Fine. That doesn't impinge on my humanity at all. But I just don't see a use case where I can create like a deep fake video and it's anything really good. Yes, I can make a funny video of my friend doing something ridiculous, but I could also like make a video of a political assassination that didn't happen. Like there's no good moral. But anyway, I mean the whole like kind of like the Luddite argument of like any technology past a certain point has been bad. I mean, you kind of see that all throughout history. There's always kind of a small subsection of people that are kind of raging against the machine. And I guess I would agree with Pope Leo that the technology itself, especially now that it's so tied to specific entities and corporations, like it's like Anthropic, it's OpenAI, like, and there are real people, whereas like the printing press, like Gutenberg creates the printing press and then there's one in every city within the space of like 20 years, independently operating. Like he's not Sam Altman, like controlling the future of the printing press. So it's different in that regard. And I'm not necessarily anti any of this. I actually feel like as Catholics, or as like I would say as Christians generally, it's our duty to like affirm humanity and affirm morality behind these, because I feel like, especially with something like AI where it's moving at such a fast pace, it can be almost easy to lose sight of the broader picture and the morality of how we're using these things and who's being affected by it, and et cetera. So I feel like it's almost our, as the salt of the earth, it's kind of our duty. So if it's like, who's the one that's supposed to be kind of directing this, or is supposed to be kind of reining it in, like Shift? Like, should my phone be my entire conduit to reality, or should it be a tool with Google Maps and Spotify? And that's really what it's useful for. So it's like, who is it that's going to stand between this like insane force, this fire hose that technology can be, especially now with AI? I feel like that is a Christian duty.
It is.
It's a Christian duty. It's the same Christian duty like Wilberforce had standing up in the face of slavery. It's like, dude, there are certain things that are like these huge engines, and it's like there has to be somebody like Gandalf, that you shall not pass. Like there has to be.
You have to then know what we are in order to defend it. Mm-hmm. If these words don't have definitions, if self, soul, charity, justice, love, eudaimonia, what is the good life, right? So I don't like productivity as a goal to aspire to, and I never advocate that Shift should be used in order to go make more widgets at the widget factory. Mm-hmm. I think that leisure is a real thing, eutropelia, having fun, like these are genuine virtues that we should cultivate, and we should figure that out. And that's what I want people to use Shift for, is to turn off the fire hose so that they can start to answer the question, what am I? And I don't think that that's like an ephemeral, well, it's, you define your own life. Like the Penny Catechism says, you are supposed to, like the purpose of our life is to know, love, and serve God in this life so we can be happy with him in the next. Know, love, and serve God. So like you have to then figure out, what does that look like? What does that look like specifically for you? Now, there's variability in that, like we have different vocations, marriage or the priesthood. And then within that, you have different talents that God gives you. He gives you different graces. You have a different story to tell. And then you're in a different era, a different time. So it's also, I'm not an advocate for LARPing or delusion of bring an era that is dead and gone into this era and try to create it and then be mad when it doesn't work and force everybody else into this. This is like, we are not Amish. You're the salt of the earth right now. So truthfully, awesome. I love what they're doing. Hallow, awesome. That's great. Go do that. What you're doing on the channel, I think, is just fantastic. And you're sharing these perspectives through YouTube. Okay? You're talking to a Sony camera and putting it out on the internet. But I'm desperate to understand, and that's why I'm starting to have these conversations, is I'm desperate to understand, what are we and what are the tools, the technologies doing to what we are? So my grandpa was born in 1943. And he said that the period of time that changed the most is like the last 15 years. It's like the world today is unrecognizable. And he's the bridge between his grandfather, the last century, and me, born in 1998. So he has a really fascinating perspective on like both ends. And it does seem like there was just a complete step change in the last 20-ish years compared to even the last 6,000 years of human history. Something has been radically broken or changed in the last 20 years with the smartphone, with the internet, with something. Like, do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think maybe it was a direction we were already going socially with the rise of the smartphone and social media, but I think COVID has really exacerbated a lot of it in a way that I still see us struggling to kind of free ourselves from now. And in the post-COVID era, or whatever you would like to call our current paradigm, I still see people almost exhibiting traits both online and in person that clearly were cultivated in isolation. And it's interesting, the medieval historian Barbara Tuchman, I have beefs with some of her historical points of view, but something she says is really interesting in her book, A Distant Mirror, which is a great medieval history, social history, is that the medieval man never knew loneliness in the modern sense. Like he would have had no conception of loneliness because he was never alone. Because the villages were communal, everything was built on top of each other. It's been like this in human history for almost like you would not know privacy. Like privacy did not exist. you slept in one big hut and you would wait till the kids went to bed so you could like make love to your wife. But all this happened in the same room that you cooked and slept and ate and played in and read and whatever.
Yeah.
If you were, part of the nobility, maybe you'd have some different rooms. And but anyway, all of that to say that I think our brains aren't necessarily designed to exist in a vacuum at all in any way, like socially. And any of these like mass shooters or these like people in the modern day who exhibit these incredibly antisocial behaviors, whenever the details about their life start to come out, it's always they spent an extended amount of time in isolation with their only connection being to like increasingly radical internet forums that led them down a path. But I think one of the great sins of the internet era is that something, going back to what we were talking about community, online community, is that it's a facsimile. It's not
Yep.
real. It's not real community. And
Nope.
I see, I'm not anybody to cast aspersions on anybody's sense of, where they're getting their sense of social belonging, and maybe different things for different people. But I see people be like, oh, my Discord, I don't really know anybody in my city, but like my Discord community is like, that's where I feel at home. And it's like, yeah, but like you have to go like this, like you have to you have to put yourself outside of your comfort zone and go meet people locally. And I know we're getting into like the meat and potatoes of like what it means to be human, but I feel
it is the meat and potatoes, because you have to, in order for you to say that Discord is not real community, and what we're doing right now is more in the direction of that, you have to, okay, so then what is the fullness of that? Obviously the beatific vision, but also like it means that seeing with your eyes and sitting in proximity to a person, perhaps breaking bread with them, having a meal, that speaks to a truth about what it means to be a hylomorphic body-soul composite that we call a person, and that the internet is violating some truth about that. I think
just imagining somebody, let's say during COVID, but even now, sitting on their computer, let's say you're working from home, you DoorDash your groceries or you DoorDash your meals, like you can, you get your dating box checked from Pornhub, and everything's kind of all your needs as a man are taken care of right there from your dad. You don't even need to stand up. It's crazy. It's really, really, really insane what convenience culture has done to us. And I think what we don't realize, especially like, let's say you're a Discord mod, like you're really involved in the online community, it can almost give you this facsimile, this fake feeling of like selflessness. Like, oh, I'm a moderator, I'm helping people, I'm chatting with people all day. But really, when you're sitting alone there in front of your computer, it's creating, it's something that's going to take, I think, anthropologists and like social scientists years to unravel.
Yeah.
But it's creating maybe like what we call shorthand as like main character syndrome, or because really everything you're doing is completely, it's all completely selfish antisocial behavior. And there's also some weird aspect of it where instead of, and there's no way this, I'm not God, but there's no way this is what's intended just from reading scripture, that you are supposed to be an outside observer to like Jesus is always in the scriptures, is always going towards suffering. You look at somebody like St. Francis, he's always going into suffering, towards people, into discomfort, into things that will shake things up and cause problems, but he knows it's for the good of everything. Whereas if you're sitting alone on your computer and you're observing and consuming 24/7 and never going towards anything that actually matters, there's like some weird, I don't know, it's almost like you're becoming something that's like not, it's like detaching you from your humanity.
It's Cartesian. It's a brain in a vat.
Yes. Yeah.
So we are body soul composites, and this is just strictly mind in a vat. Information comes in, and the thing that I think scares me the most, or definitely up there the most, is first, it's very hard for people in our generation to know what was lost. Like my grandpa has a perspective on it, but in 25 years, it pains me to say he's not going to be with us anymore, or maybe 30 years. Maybe I get another 25 out of an 85-year-old. That'd be awesome. But the kids today who, by the time they're conscious, they're looking at an iPad. They have no idea what it's like. They're the fish in the dirty water. They don't know. And I think we're seeing whispers through story, even through the content that's being made on social media. You're hearing whispers of people go like, oh, I know that song. And I'm using the word song metaphorically. They're like, there's a whisper of the past here. And it's not the past. I think we're drawn to the past because it's like, why are you drawn to the Middle Ages? I would submit that it's probably because it makes you feel more of what you think you're supposed to be. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think with history in general, we tend to imagine it as a straight line of progress.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of senses that causes us to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Okay.
So we're just like anything medieval, let's say, for example, completely nix that. Like they were wrong about everything. And it's like, well, they were demonstrably wrong about, X, Y, and Z, but like they were definitely correct about community and friendship and relationship and how to live in communion with the earth and the world around you and the natural world. And there was a lot that we've forgotten about what it means to be part of something greater than yourself. I think that's really the great loss of comparing the Middle Ages to modern society, the loss of feeling a connection to something outside of you. And in the medieval world, there was like countless opportunities for that. There was your village. There was maybe you were part of a guild and that's your brotherhood and that's something greater than yourself that you're part of. There's the church and God, like you're part of a greater salvation story that you are playing a role in. Whereas now it's like you're out on the waters in a boat by yourself and there's nobody there. And it's just, I don't know how you can kind of come up with any sort of anything to kind of set your compass to if it's just you're out alone in the ocean by yourself.
Well, it's definitely Plato's cave where we're seeing the shadow puppets of community, of all of these things that we say are good. We're looking at the shadows on the wall. And I do see like what Shift is doing as it turns off the shadow puppets and it forces you to start going, hey, where am I? Maybe I should wander out of the cave a little bit. And there is some deeply entrenched Stockholm syndrome. I mean, I feel it. But everything that I say about this is not coming from a place of virtue signaling at all. When my phone shifts, I get uncomfortable. Do you experience this too?
Dude, I was actually, if we're now like good to talk about Shift the product,
please.
I've been continuously doing the 30-day rehab. So I'm like straight.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm straight. I have no access to like any of that stuff on my phone for the last like at least 90 days. And for the first, I also like as part of this process, I got Shift and then I couldn't really figure out the right software to get on my laptop because I wanted to also be able to shift my laptop.
It's coming.
That's what I was hoping. But so I bought like a safe on Amazon with a key. And so I put the laptop with the key and then put it in a timed lockbox, the key. It's like a whole process because my life is social media. And as I've been doing this professionally, it's taken over more and more of my life where I go on Instagram to post something and then I stay for 2 hours to scroll reels. And not only that, all of this noise is interfering with my creative process. Like I might have a great idea for a video and then it gets muddled by 50 Instagram reels I see about this topic.
And you forget.
Yeah. And so it just felt like, so anyway, I started the 30-day rehab for the first time and started for like 5 or 6 hours a day locking my laptop away. So it's just like, I am like completely manual for a chunk of the day. And it felt like I was withdrawing from drugs. It was crazy. Yeah. Like I would open my phone and there's nothing there. Like there's no Instagram, because it's shifted. I would open my phone and just like open photos just to like give myself a dopamine hit, or like open Gmail knowing there's no email in there and just like sitting there like rocking back and forth. And then like pretty soon I was able to, like if I have free time, like dude, my attention span had gotten so bad I couldn't even like watch TV. I couldn't even like sit through a movie because I would just start taking my phone out and scrolling it. And I got to the point where it's like, I can sit and watch like a 2-hour movie and just it's like changed my whole mind state, but it was a painful process for a couple weeks. It was like very strange. But then also now I feel, at least in my creative process, much clearer and much like I can hold on to these ideas much firmer, and I'll come to an idea. And then instead of scrolling Instagram, I'll be like, I'm low on my steps today. Let me go for a walk. And that allows the idea to germinate. And my phone's not with me because I can't be, so I'm just on the walk and it's germinating. And then I have an idea like the medieval PTSD and the reading that I've done all kind of comes together in my head. Because like throughout the week, I'm writing the script internally, like the points. And then it all kind of comes together like that. But I don't think that would have been possible without being able to put my foot in the door with Shift. Things need to be forcefully taken away from me. I am I don't learn easily.
It's not just you. Yeah. It's this idea. I realized that it was my Catholic philosophy, my Catholic theology, despite being an atheist at the time that I came up with this, that informed the product technology itself, that like it's the papacy. It's the difference between liberty and license of you don't just get to be free because you can choose. You're free because you are only able to do that which is good. Like that's what shift is. You can't help but do the good thing. Now you're free. Now you're free to be what you are.
Oh man, dude, that's a great point. And I think we've totally skewed the modern concept of freedom, what that means. Because I think we think of freedom now, I'll just say like in the US, as like complete access. Like freedom means you can do whatever you want. Like reckless hedonism, you can destroy yourself and your community. Like, but that's what freedom is. If you want to do X, Y, and Z, that's totally fine. Whereas I think true freedom is like, has guardrails to it. And that's like something like shift. It's like the option needs to be removed. Because if especially like I noticed, I turn to social media in times of like emotional. Like if I'm like not feeling good about something that happened that day or just boredom or whatever, even if I've installed a blocker app on my phone, I will delete the blocker app and go on Instagram because it gives me the dopamine. It makes me feel good. And so it's like, I will always like, I'm a relief-seeking missile. I will always be looking for the cheapest dopamine hit possible. And that's just human. I think it's not me, it's my brain. It's how we're wired. So I feel like I feel more free having and of course there's a freedom where it's like, you can unshift for 3 minutes a day, which I feel like is actually a great feature. And, you don't have to do the 30-day rehab. You can set up your own shift schedule and all that. But it's like, I put the guardrails in place, but then the ultimate like driver's keys were taken away. And I think there's really something interesting there with Catholic teaching. I think, that's a really interesting comparison.
Yeah, I have wrestled with this a lot because we've been all infected with the Protestant work ethic of you earn your salvation, which I know they say you don't, but somehow we've all been infected with this. Like you have to work for it. You have to do it. And I want to run what I'm about to say by like an actual theologian or whatever, but I don't think we earn salvation through works. I also don't think it's just faith. It's faith and works, obviously. But there's a third aspect that I don't think anyone talks about, and that is appetite. And so what you attend to shapes your soul. And if you were locked in a room without the mechanisms of sin, you could still go to hell if you did not desire God. And so what we attend to, what we desire, is rewarded. God says, I'm going to give you what you want. This is what it means to have free will. God says, I will honor your free will. I'll give you exactly what you want. Porn? Keep going. I'm God, but I'm not going to stop your hand. I'm not going to change your heart for you because I want you to want me from your soul in the same way that I guess this movie Obsession, I haven't seen it, but it's kind of asking the question, like, what would happen if she had to be obsessed with you? Well, that's not love. Everybody knows it's not love, and then it ends in calamity, and that's why it's a horror movie. So if all we're doing is attending to the banal, the vapid, the pointless, the meaningless, even if it's like morally neutral, like let's say you're not watching pornography and all you're doing is just doom scrolling, you're going to get to the end of your life. And especially people in our generation, it'll be about 25 years of our life on average. The person who doesn't stop doom scrolling will spend a quarter of a century looking at their phone. They're going to get to the end of their life and they will have zero appetite for the true, the good, and the beautiful. It'll be gone. They'll have no capacity for it.
I think it's interesting too that I mean, obviously all of this is engineered specifically to be this way. And that the truth and beauty are not money printers. Outrage is a money printer. Pornography is a money printer. Things that hit those deep kind of things that make you fearful are a money printer. So that's what you're shown in your algorithm. I've just always found that interesting, and I think it's almost psychologically steered us in a certain direction as a culture and a civilization in the last 10 years that we're just now kind of starting to at least recognize that we're fish in this muddy water. But it's really fascinating. That you are what you give your attention to, like you said, and I think it was Aristotle who said, "You are what you repeatedly do." So
Yeah.
excellence is a habit, not
Yep.
not a trait. But I also heard a guy say the other day, the first thing you do in the morning is your God, which I thought was fascinating.
I think
So
that was Father Mike. Father Mike
that might
Schmitz?
have been it.
I think so.
That might have been it. And so it's like, if the first thing you do is grab your phone, which almost everybody does, and start doom scrolling immediately, there's all these like neurological, like Huberman will tell you a million reasons why that's a terrible thing to do.
Right.
But I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the spiritual side of it. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's what you are submitting to first thing in the morning. And that's defines your, I try to do my best to take life one day at a time, especially because Jesus says, you know, tomorrow has enough worries of its own.
Yep.
And it's like, you are, what kind of day are you setting yourself up for? Of consumption, of observing, of placing because I almost feel like in some weird metaphorical sense, you're staring at this device all day, but even when you're out in the world, like you have to interact, you go into a store or whatever, you have to interact with people. It's almost like, even though the device is no longer in your hand, you have a screen between you and that person, because it's just what your brain's been conditioned for. And I don't know, maybe that's the shift thing, is to break the screen, like get the screen. I think that's something like your grandfather would speak to, that we've lost, is this sense of like intimacy with the people around us, and a lack, because I don't know. I was sometimes the best moments aren't like, I've traveled the world, done a lot of cool stuff, but some of the best moments are like sitting around with my friends, drinking coffee and telling tales of yesteryear, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not, nobody's scrolling. It's just humanity. Like, I don't know. We might as well be in a medieval tavern. It's like a story as old as time. And
well, the sad part is when you could be so conditioned that you don't even enjoy when you're in those moments. So you might fight for them, and you might even have one, and then you're there and you're itching. You're not comfortable. You're not settled.
Dude, I've been there where I've been out with friends. I mean, this is pre-shift, but I've been out with friends, and I'm like, I'm already thinking about laying in bed scrolling TikTok later. I'm like, it's gonna be so good when I can scroll TikTok later.
And that's, I think, the scariest part, is that you actually can be so transmogrified by the technology that you aren't happy when you get the thing that is actually best for you. I mean, this is literally what happens with pornography. You get such a super stimuli that when you have the wife or the husband, they're not enough. And then you ruined it. Like, that's the tragic part. The thing that freed me from pornography addiction, besides God and grace, was in early 2020s. I, for some reason, had the grace to conceptualize what marriage would look like. And then I recognized that that's going to be destroyed. And that's the Faustian bargain that you make, of like, it's wrong to say that there's nothing good about pornography. If it weren't, there'd be nothing to be drawn toward. This is the first principle of practical reason. Do the good, avoid the evil. Nobody does anything that they think isn't valuable. So there has to be something in pornography that is valuable. And it is. Because sex is good. Our bodies are good. Sexual pleasure is good. Procreation's good. And so the scary part is that, like, you can lose it. You can lose a happy marriage. You can lose your sexuality. You can lose the joy of sitting with your friends drinking coffee. And it terrifies me that, like, it actually could all go away. And that's where I start to see something like Shift as like, this is the only bulwark we have against. You already see it with the young kids. Like, they've lost gray matter in their brain.
Yeah.
They're literally, if part of being human is having a certain amount of gray matter in their brain, they're less human now. And the phone took it away. The iPad took it away.
It's, I don't know. It's interesting too to think about. We're talking about things like, again, maybe simple is not the right word, but just true, human, marriage, fellowship with your friends, sitting around having coffee. These things that are just like almost like things humans have been doing. You know, mating for life is something humans have been doing since forever. Spending time with your friends and, you know, sharing stories. That's something we've been doing around campfires since time immemorial. And I think part of the negative, and maybe this might be of like visual culture in the last 100 years with the television and movies and now the internet, is like something being sold to you beyond that. And I think you see with the rise of like a guy like Andrew Tate or whatever, right, and this is all tied into like young men being exposed to pornography as well. So like with dating, there's dating apps, which give you this illusion that there's thousands of women out there that you can choose from. There's pornography, which is like, there are, especially AI pornography now, where you can, I think, create a woman who will do whatever. It's like, and then you open up your Instagram, and there's Andrew Tate with a garage full of Lamborghinis saying like, if you are not making $50,000 a day, you need to go back to the drawing board, or all these other like garbage, influencers or whatever. And I think that too can cause difficulty, because if you're trying to come out of the doom scrolling spiral and you look around at your life and you're like, I barely leave my bedroom, I work a job I hate, I have no friends, no relationships, whatever. It's like it's a grind. I've been there. I've come out of that spiral, and it's like, I think the story that, and this is like a really trite concept, but that social media is everybody's highlight reel. But I think what I see with young people, and I like even people younger than me that I know that are coming out of this spiral, that are their frontal lobes developing, they're like, it can't just all be porn and TikTok. It's like, dude, real life is a grind. Like, it's not going to be Andrew Tate. It's not going to be a garage full of Lambos and you're making a bunch of money on Bitcoin and you're a millionaire overnight. Like, you're like, the job's going to suck for a while. It's going to be a while before you like meet somebody you really like. Yeah. It's going to be a while before you have a circle of friends. And it's like, we've lost that too, I think, too, in the era of instant gratification. Any sense of like patience, or even this medieval concept that life is a journey to salvation. Like you're a pilgrim on the road to salvation, and like there's pitfalls, but it's like a process of patience, of purification, is something I think that needs to be recognized more, because I don't know, that's where I get no satisfaction out of, maybe it's just because I've gotten older or life experience, but I get like the instant. When I was a kid, I always needed instant gratification on everything. And it just brings me no joy. I don't even get the dopamine hit from it anymore. I need the struggle. I need the friction. That's the other thing, is the removal of all friction that I can get, like pornography, for example, or TikTok, which is like, I'm sure stimulates your dopamine in a way similar to pornography. It's not like alcohol or like cocaine, where I have to go to the store and buy it, and you can't or I have to go to a dealer, or like there's friction there. There's it's not just here. Whereas like something like pornography, it's in your pocket all day. There's no real like hangover. There's not like, I might embarrass myself at the work party if I,
drink too much.
It's just it's so insidious. But you're right that it's not, none of these things are necessarily all one thing or another. There has to be something fruitful or that people are drawn to. But I think it's those things can be bastardized.
Well, the fact that when you shift your phone or turn off the doom scrolling, that you don't awaken into paradise is hard. Because what we're basically saying is that there's the correct human form is sub 15% body fat, and everyone here is 60% body fat. And so what we're going to do is start putting you on Ozempic. That's literally what shift is. It's the Ozempic of screen time. You don't have a choice. You pin this, it's gone. You're going to stop eating and you will lose weight. You don't have a choice about that anymore. But you don't like awaken into a flourishing economy with meaningful work and a community of people who are saying, hooray, you made it out. Like, welcome. You awaken into hell. It's awful. And it's going to require work, and not just work, but vision of what your body will look like at the end of this health journey of like, what will your life look like? And something that I really want to strive for is to give language to people so that they understand like, what is human life supposed to feel like? What is eudaimonia? Because to hear a boomer say like, kids these days, all you got your TikToks and your Instabooks and you're just scrolling. When I was your age, we would ride our bicycles and buy a Coke for a nickel or whatever. Like, thanks, that's great. But even that isn't enough vision. It's so easy to brush off. Like, somehow we have to be able to transmit to people that when you stop doing this, you're going to wake up in hell. That's good for you. And here's the form of what you're fighting for. This is what it can look like. And I promise you, it's going to fill you. You're going to be fuller because of that. than you got on TikTok and porn.
Yeah, it's in any case, I'm in recovery. I work a 12-step program, and one of the things they'll tell you, like when you quit whatever your substance is, it will get much worse before it gets better. Like, because now all of a sudden that thing that was numbing you to the world around you and the circumstances that you've allowed yourself to be put into is removed. Like the filter is gone. Your TikTok is gone. Your porn is gone. Your whatever is gone. Your alcohol, your drugs. And now it's like you are now still in the life you had built when you were using those things, but you don't have the numbing agent anymore. And it's going to get much worse before it gets better. It's like they say like the first 30 days of sobriety are the hardest because it's like I'm still living in this life I've created for myself, but I don't have the substance anymore. So I think there needs to be, and again, I think with the lack of friction in the modern world, and also not just the lack of friction between us and pleasure, but the lack of friction between us and the world. Like the weather outside doesn't really matter if I'm inside in air conditioning all day. I don't care about famine or drought or really any of these things that people would have racked their brains about for most of human history. So I think, I don't know, the beauty of suffering, I don't know how you transmit that to a young person. It's interesting. My younger brother's 22 and he's just now getting into like jogging and eating healthy and whatever. But he just graduated from college. He was in a fraternity, lived that life. And then now he's like kind of awakening to. And it's interesting to see that process happening. He's much more mature than I was at his age. But, and I think part of that comes from his algorithm in a weird way too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think any time in history where you see a cultural lull, like what maybe you would think of like the Dark Ages, fall of Rome, the Dark Ages, or these times in history where it seems like the lights went dim. I think a lot of people feel like we're living through that right now. Like everything sucks. It's the AI apocalypse, maybe climate change, maybe World War III. All these things are going to end, and there's this undeniable, I don't know what it is in the human psyche or consciousness, need for like a rubber band snap back towards something else, and it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen with it's not like a global phenomenon ever. It's always a small core of dudes and women who are like, they will go against the grain and they will be hopeful and they will work hard and they will do something different than everybody else is doing. And it's almost like they've been divinely touched to like lead. Because you think of something like the Renaissance, it's like, oh, I know Leonardo da Vinci, I know Michelangelo, I know Raphael. It's like, yeah, those were the guys. Yeah. It was not Italy, it was not Europe. It was like, it was the guys. It was like the ones who were doing this. So it's like, I don't know, I've said this in a couple of my videos, but like statistically, someone watching this video could be the next. Yeah. So like stop, like pick up the sketch pad, put down the, I don't know. It's easier said than done. Again, it was only easy for me when I had the tools it had to be taken out of my hands.
It's the snapback phenomenon. There's no better person to talk to about this than you. The rise of homesteading now, and it's the irony is that really only people who are wealthy can really afford to do it. But that has become a core on TikTok, cottage core or homesteading core, whatever. This Ballerina Farms chick, right? We've got the 7 kids, we've got the land, we've got the cows. It's like, also your husband's like heir to the airline industry or whatever her husband does. Like that's why you can afford to do this. But it's so fascinating that we have basically pedestalized a manufactured version of the thing that was baseline for the peasants.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's an idea that's called pastoralism, and it's been a thing with rich people since forever.
Okay.
So the more like even like the medieval nobility, you're a medieval nobleman, you have servants who work the land, you have peasants who work the land for you, servants who take care of the household for you. Like you really live a life of luxury and leisure as much as you could in the Middle Ages. And you see, they start to write poetry because they have nothing else to do. And in their poetry, they're like wistfully talking about the simple life of the rustic peasant, and his wife is baking bread. And of course, like the peasants are out there dying of like typhus and like whatever. But it's like, it's this thing that's been around forever where it's like, once you reach a certain level of comfort, you start to like romanticize labor and romanticize these things. And what's interesting about the tradwife movement, one of my like first videos ever was about this, but I think we see something like the tradwife movement or the cottagecore movement or whatever as like a reversion to history. Like this is how, but kind of. The answer is kind of. I think with tradwife specifically, it seems to be a callback to like the 50s, like the housewife in the apron, and the husband leaves for work with the briefcase, and she takes care of the whole house and makes a cake from scratch and whatever. But really, for most of human history, people existed in what were called household economies. So it's like, if you're a peasant farmer, your wife is a farmer too, and your children are farmers, and
Yeah.
you all live together in your workplace. Same, even like if you're a medieval burgher, like a city dweller, and you're a like a textile merchant, you live in the shop, and your wife helps you out in the shop, and and your kids help in the shop too with the textiles. And so it's like, there's no concept of I go off to work for 10 hours a day and the wife stays home and does everything. Like, the family is a unit, you're a domestic unit. And I think we've lost that. And there's this really interesting book called I think it's called Iron John or something along those lines, by this like 20th century psychologist, talking about the damage of post-industrial work culture, how damaging it is for young men that the father is out of the house for 12 hours a day.
Yes.
You don't understand what he's doing. As a child, you don't understand where he is all day. And it creates like fear and distrust of your father in your head. And then for young men too, then you're sent off to public school or to school, and you're around women all day, and your masculine impulses are, and that's not to say like, any like argument about the gender dynamic there, but it's like, young boys might have different needs than young girls. And when every teacher at your public school is a woman, a young woman, like certain impulses that are healthy in young boys are kind of like sanded down. Or now in our modern political paradigm, they're told that these are problematic impulses, like, or they're given Ritalin or Adderall when really they just need to go run around outside. And I don't know, it's the removal of the father from the home, whether permanently or for like 12 hours. Anyway, that's an offshoot of like trad wife stuff.
I'm so glad you went there. Having now being a new husband and a new father.
Congrats.
Thank you. I immediately went, oh yeah, that's all bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Nonsense. The trad wife thing is nonsense. Like it's an impossibility to behave like that without abusing your family.
Right.
I absolutely believe that to manufacture the absent father out working he's a cog in some corporate machine doing utterly meaningless work. And it's meaningless because it's not his vocation, it's not his family. And then the wife being subjected to like this isolated child rearing and housekeeping. That's not what it was forever. Now the gender roles arise because men and women aren't the same thing,
right?
But the extremity of it, of like the woman stays at home, it's like the husband did too, because the oikonomia, the household domestic church is what it was.
Right.
This is what they cultivated together. They raised the children together, and you were just hopeful you had a boy so that he could go out and like lift the heavy shit in the farm with dad. So I thoroughly agree with that, and I wanted to talk to you about career because the concept of career is a modern fabrication. You didn't become a lawyer or an accountant or anything. There wasn't an anything. I mean, maybe you were a cobbler. Maybe you made barrels or whatever. Like I'm not saying there wasn't specialization, but this idea of a career, can you just expound on like just how crazy new that is?
Yeah, definitely.
Before we get into careers, I want to hear more about why, because I'm curious if it's the same for me. Like, what is the passion rooted in? Why?
Yeah. Well, first, I have a just natural passion for, I don't know, just Christianity is fascinating to me.
Okay.
But like religion in general, but Christianity, even when I was a little kid and I got dragged kicking and screaming to church service, my mom was telling me recently, like, once the music started, I would sit there and stare at the stained glass. Like I just like, in a way that my brothers didn't, like I just was always kind of like enamored by all of it. And so I think imagining a world, because we have Christianity in our world now, but it's like, it's a backseat Christianity. It's not, it doesn't really, even as much as people want to say like, oh, fundamental evangelicalism is drives our nation's politics and whatever, in a way, but it's very confused. Just imagining a fully like Catholic world. I forget which historian said this, but they said the past would feel like a foreign country. Like you would be so, in some ways, like things would be similar. People feel happy and sad, and they have the same. They're not lonely, but they want a companion for life, and the same human impulses we have. But in other ways, they're so culturally different. And I just was fascinated by the idea of like, what does it mean to exist purely in a religious framework? Like, what is it? Because we can't really imagine that now because we have so many other things
Yeah.
pulling our attention in different directions. And then also, I think the Middle Ages are kind of the first time where you start to get like individual personalities that start to kind of come out of the historical woodwork. It's difficult for me to like conceptualize ancient Rome or like what it would have been like to meet a Roman or an ancient Greek or an Egyptian pharaoh or something like that. But you know, in the late Middle Ages, high Middle Ages, you start to get personal details and unique personal quirks, and it starts to be this mirror that looks so similar to our modern day and yet so alien that it just is like this weird tension, this fascinating tension to me. And also that I feel like it's a historically maligned period.
Yeah.
You ask anybody,
Yeah.
actually, I was reading some book. It might have been Time Traveler's Guide to Medieval England by Ian Mortimer. But he talks about how there was a survey done at a museum he was working at. Would you rather live during the Renaissance or during the Middle Ages? And overwhelmingly, people said Renaissance, but they couldn't really, they're like, oh, I would have loved to like sit around in Da Vinci's studio and like, you know, this like crazy historical conception we have. And then they're like, and the reason I wouldn't want to live in the Middle Ages is because it would have been dirty and rats everywhere and, you know, people just rolling around in filth. And again, like the funny thing about Monty Python is all those guys are like medieval nerds, but like the movies are parodies. And I think that's what's stuck in people's conception. Like everything was gray, there was no color, everybody was miserable. And so I think to me, I'm always drawn to like correcting a narrative or like if everybody says something's one way, I have to like look into it and see if that's true. And I think the more I dug, also, one other note, on YouTube, as I was like getting interested in medieval history before I started creating content, every single video is like why you wouldn't last a day in the Middle Ages, why medieval peasants were living in hell, you know? And there was not one video I could find where it was like, hey, this was one good thing about the Middle Ages. And it wasn't even like I consciously identified a niche. It was like, I feel a responsibility to, because those are our ancestors. Like, what do you know, that's part of our human story. Like if you know, your identity is also wrapped up in the identity of the past. And it's like, I don't know. I think there's something interesting to be said there about how, at least in the West, negative we are about our own history and how much we hate our history.
We do.
But
we hate it.
That was something that was kind of fascinating to me. And then I was like, dude, someone's got to educate.
So you said at the start it was an 80-20 split, but am I correct in saying that from a quality of life standpoint, and by that I'm including freedom to do what is right, freedom to worship, ownership of property, security in where you are, and then access and availability to sufficient food. Is it similar, worse, or better than like what you and I have to go through today in order to subsist, to live? Yeah.
Well, I will say first that the 80-20 is like different times and places, and anybody who says they can give you like a firm percentage is like, it's historically inaccurate. We're piecing things together from primary sources that again differ in different times and places. So, I mean, it's one thing I'll say about feudalism is that I think we imagine that Rome falls, the Middle Ages start, and like Europe's feudal, but it takes like centuries for it to develop, and it develops in different ways in different places. All that to say, right now, well, something that I've talked about in a previous video is this new concept of techno-feudalism, where more and more of our life is happening online, more and more of like your banking happens online, you do all of your work on the internet, your social life is on the internet, everything is on the internet, and all of that is controlled by like a few guys, a few corporations, basically. And it was kind of similar in the Middle Ages. You know, the church controlled this, your local feudal lord controlled that, but there were always things that the peasants held communally. So there would be like communal goods that were just, you know, nobody else really had any right to them. They were different, maybe tools or grain supply or something that was just among the peasantry that was just for them. And I think now something we're seeing in like the new techno-feudal era is like, you will own nothing. You will own nothing. And not only like, you can't even band together with your, you know, everything will be owned by faceless corporations. And I mean, the negative side about feudalism is that you had no recourse really. But like, at the very least, it's like there's a face-to-face oath happening between you and your Lord. Like there is supposed to be a two-way relationship. I owe you something and you owe me something. And if you don't do that, we're going to get the peasants together and we're going to drag you out of the castle and cut your head off. That actually happened much less than you think it would in the Middle Ages, but it did happen.
And I knew it was possible.
It was possible. It was
But
possible.
like Alex Karp and Peter Thiel,
Yeah.
Mark Zuckerberg and
Yeah.
Bill Gates, these people are out of our
Right,
reach.
right. And actually, one of the reasons it happened less than we might think in the Middle Ages is because of this idea that leadership is ordained by God. So actually, in the Middle Ages, I think we get this idea that if a king misbehaved, they'd be beheaded or whatever. And that's really more of like a Tudor England, like post. That's like a French Revolution, like hundreds of years after the Middle Ages. But even the worst medieval kings, it's so interesting to read the opinions of people living through these reigns of these kings, because the king was put in place by God. So it's like, it's never the king's fault. So you'll see like these horribly profligate, like just totally irresponsible, totally inept kings. And the response of the people will be, he must be getting bad advice. He must be getting bad advice.
The same thing happens now with Trump. You can't tell somebody over the age of 65 that Trump is just doing something wrong. They're like, the courts, the advisors,
everybody's out to get him.
The Democrats. It's like, you don't think he could just potentially, just throwing it out there, do something wrong? Like, no, it's the advisors.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think again, it's that like cult of personality and something, especially in the early Middle Ages, this idea of, because it's so fascinating to conceptualize. I know we're talking about like social history. Like if there's the early medieval conception of monarchy, if there's a guy who says, I am in control of all of this, why you and not me?
It has to be from,
can I just kill you? So in the Middle Ages, the reason why you see so many of these early Germanic kings converting to Catholicism and aligning themselves with the church is that now they have theocratic kingship. They can say, God ordained me to do this. And we all just became Catholics, so you have to respect this. And it's good for the Pope too, because now he has a bunch of Germanic warlords that can send their armies into Italy to protect him. It's a two-way street. It depends on what you're willing to trade off. And I think now we can't really imagine losing any of our material comfort that we have because we've known it for our entire lives. But everything's a trade-off. So you would lose a great degree of the material comfort if you were to have been born in the Middle Ages and have survived past infancy. But I think you would gain a degree of like spiritual comfort and community. And you don't really see, and even among the most learned medieval scholars, like guys who have gone to university, the early forms of universities, and like what we would think of today as like the overeducated academia, they're never really asking like, why am I here? There's no like nihilism. There's no, because it's like, they might be asking about the nature of God or what does creation mean or these questions, but and so you can imagine that if that's what the most educated guys in the world at the time are not asking that question, your average medieval peasant lives in a world that's saturated with such meaning that a question like that would, you could ask a peasant that, if you stopped a peasant in 12th century France and were like, what does it all mean, man? What's it all for? He would look at you like you were insane. It would be like, what are you talking about? God, my family, and my farm, like, I don't know. So I think you're trading a great degree of material comfort, but like
what is fascinating to see the intellectual debates that happened, like it went from debating heresy, which implies that there's a God and something to be heretical about, to then you finally get enough stability and material comforts that then you get the, is there a God?
Yeah.
I don't know if Nietzsche could have arisen in the Middle Ages. Do you think he could have?
Well, you know, something that's really interesting. One of the coolest parts of medieval Christianity in general, and even like early medieval, late Roman Christianity, is the concept of like the desert monk, like the guy like Saint Anthony the Great, or Saint Simeon the Stylite, who go out into the wilderness by themselves in a cave and live there for like 50 years in solitude, just praying and fasting, and people come to them for spiritual advice, and they fight demons. You read all these crazy stories from like the original accounts and chroniclers. And what's interesting is that was only possible. This desire for Hermeticism, to go out into the desert and to like commune with God, was only possible in like comfortable, settled societies with a significant leisure class, because Hermeticism is a rebellion against like modernity and like luxury and comfort. So in medieval Europe, it takes centuries and centuries and centuries for there to be any kind of Hermeticism. While you look at like Byzantium, which is like a settled empire with like a rich upper class, and those are the guys who are escaping into the desert. And I think you see it now with the Gen Z religious revival. You need comfort and luxury and whatever for people to realize it means nothing. If you're in a subsistence society like early medieval Western Europe, especially at a place where it's like you can't go into the desert, it snows for most of the, you know what I mean? It's like different climate too, but like there's no luxury to rebel against. You're like subsisting. Then there's no Hermeticism. There's no escaping into the desert, but you have to have something to escape from. I don't know. It's interesting.
You said something about in the past there were miracles, and you said you still believe that there are miracles. We're just too distracted. I love that. Give me your pitch for
well,
that.
I like to like subtly Catholic pill my audience as much as I can.
Right.
Because it's like if to me, I think sometimes like I try to think about myself as an agnostic in the past, and it's like I would never click on a video that's like, but if I can kind of like weave it in. But dude, I've seen, I mean, like I mentioned before, I'm in recovery myself. I do AA, it's a 12-step program, and I've literally witnessed like guys go from like hopeless. Like it's like Lazarus, metaphorically, being raised from the dead. That's really what it is. It's like a guy will come in who's like living under a bridge, and like you see him 5 years later and he has like a mortgage and a wife and he's running his own business. And it's like not even the same person. It's like a complete transformation. And I'm like, to me, that's more miraculous than turning water into wine or anything that we might think of as like, you read the Bible and you're like, that's impossible. Nobody can turn water to wine. It's like, I have witnessed greater miracles. So it's like, maybe I realize I'm in a privileged position to see this on a regular basis, and I've witnessed it in myself. But it's like, I mean, there's sciencey side of it where it's like, just because science can't measure or observe something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And any intellectually honest scientist would say we only understand like 20% of the natural world. So I'm all about ghosts and, you know, the supernatural, and I love that stuff.
The Eucharistic miracles. I think Truthfully actually did a really phenomenal video about Eucharistic miracles, and they went through all of the ones that are approved by the church and then have been validated by medical science. And I do find it a very odd paradox that modern Catholics eschew miracles and then accept transubstantiation, or at least they give lip service to.
I don't think they do.
You know,
except I think a lot of modern Catholics, at least in America, don't.
Well, that's true statistically. But even if you talk to somebody who would profess that, like, that is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of the Word made flesh, and then you're like, yes, and this miracle, they're like, no.
I know,
Where is that coming from?
No, it's really interesting, especially. Dude, medieval Catholicism, like Eucharistic miracles are like a big deal. Like that's kind of one of the core. Eucharistic miracles were, there's so many different anecdotes and stories that are passed around, kind of like eventually written down. And this is actually post-printing press, like kind of circulated widely as stories. But like the guy who robs the church, and then that week at Mass, he's kneeling while the priest raises the Eucharist, and he sees it turn into a quivering piece of flesh, or something. And it like literally does become that for a second, and then it transforms his heart, and he confesses to the crime and all these things. And there was also kind of a bastardization of it too, because the Eucharist took on such a central importance in the mind of the medieval Catholic that sometimes like a priest would have to travel somewhere with the host to like give it to a dying person, or to deliver it to somebody who couldn't make it to the church. And if he dropped a wafer, people would like take it and sell it on the black market as like, it was like worth money because it's like it has special magical powers.
Oh no.
So people, you know, it's like sometimes those things can kind of get out of control. And I'm not saying that happened all the time, but they're just like documented from Catholic sources. Like this is just something that happens sometimes. But it's I think it's interesting in our modern mind why we're so against the supernatural. And when I first started exploring Christianity, I watched a ton of those like atheist debates, Christian debates on YouTube. Really, first of all, those debates are never fair because it's always some like very, very well-educated atheist guy debating like a Southern Baptist like pastor Todd who has no idea. And Todd's like, I don't believe in dinosaurs. And the guy's like, well, actually, you know, and it's just like, this is, and like all the commenters are like, oh, like, guy young creationist gets destroyed by that atheist or whatever. And it's just like so silly. But first of all, I always think it's more worthwhile it's so easy to attack when you have nothing to defend. It's like, that's medieval warfare in a nutshell. It's much easier to attack from a position of you have nothing. So if you're an atheist, you believe in nothing. So it's like, it's the easiest position to ever have. But anyway, it's well,
let's come back to careers. The oikonomia, the household church, looked a certain way for the vast majority of human history, which was husband and wife and children working together on a project of subsistence and perhaps a family profession of some kind, whatever that was. When did the career as you and I understand it, so what do you want to be when you grow up? When did that arrive, and how foreign is it to really like what we are as a person?
Well, it's kind of difficult because, again, if you're thinking about a time period where more emphasis is being placed on what you inherit, especially if you're a member of the nobility or the royalty, you kind of, I guess there's really no such thing as what do you want to be when you grow up. It's more like you will be a duke because I, your father, am a duke and you will be a duke. I think even among that, if you look at like the medieval nobility, there was much more to them than their title. So it's like, yes, I'm a duke, but I also hunt, I joust, I'm a devout, faithful Catholic, I'm a husband, I also have 50 mistresses, all these things about me. So I think, where does this concept of like defining yourself by your career?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've been really into medieval law lately, and the idea of like the profession of being a lawyer, like going to school for that kind of develops in the high and late Middle Ages, because before that it didn't really exist, a specific career field of it. But the idea of like that question, what do you do?
Yeah.
And the answer being, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a insurance salesman, whatever. I would have to, maybe someone who's better acquainted with like the history of the United States would be able to fill me in here, but I feel like that's a post-industrial.
Has to be,
like,
right?
Yeah. Because previously, even somebody who worked in a kind of specialized labor, so going back to that idea we were talking about earlier, where the father leaves the household for 10 to 12 hours a day. Like, even if you're working in some kind of specialized labor, like that's like 4 or 5 hours of your day, and you're not going somewhere miles and miles away.
Right.
You have to sit in traffic both ways to get there. So it's not, I think the reason why it's become so ingrained in our identities is because it's what we spend much more than 40 hours a week doing. It's what we spend most of our waking time doing. So how can it not? And I think in a pre-industrial society that doesn't have such a high output and a high productivity expectation, that's not.
Well, we're sort of asking, when you say what do you do, you're sort of asking today, how do you survive?
Right.
And you're sort of defined by what you've chosen to do to survive. How do you keep existing in this hellscape? Well, I work on spreadsheets all day.
Okay, what's actually really interesting about this too, that just came to mind? In a scenario where you're asking somebody that, you're asking them that because they're a stranger. You just met them. What do you do? You're at a cocktail party. What do you do? That would not have. You grow up and die in the same village.
Yeah.
You are because in your medieval village, the reason why Barbara Tuchman said the medieval man never knew loneliness, this is your extended family. This is like 100 or 150 people that you've known your whole life. And so like medieval people traveled a little bit more than we think they did. But for the most part, you're not really you're not making small talk.
You know what Dunbar's numbers are?
Yeah, it's 150, isn't it?
I think that's the max.
Max, yeah, and then
the max is 150.
Right.
And what I make the argument that because of the internet and social media, Dunbar's numbers has been completely inverted. So we don't have the core of 5 and then 15 and then 150 or whatever his concentric circles were. What we have is infinity and none of that core group. So it's been completely inverted, except the infinity that we're in contact with has taken primacy. So that Discord group or that online faction of like, these are the people who exactly agree with my particular politics. The politics that were, by the way, curated by an algorithm. Like, if you think that this is a great experiment. If you think that you have unearthed the true nature of the political landscape, send one of those tweets or videos to somebody who you know disagrees with you.
Yeah.
They won't have seen it. It didn't show up on their Twitter feed. It didn't show up on their YouTube shorts. I know this. Like, people send me stuff and I'm like, wow, your Twitter feed is so different than mine. Like, you are living in these little enclaves online. But anyway, that is besides the point. The intimacy that we have with strangers, thousands, millions of strangers that we've never met, has taken that primacy of like our core group, and it's the shadow puppets of Plato's cave. They're not real people, so to speak. And then we've been totally gutted from the 50 or 150 people that you spent your whole life, and not only you know them, but your ancestors knew them, and you know where they came from. And you know where they're going to be. And now, like, I think it's so bizarre that you can marry somebody. My wife's from California. My daughter is going to spend a very small percentage of her life knowing half of her lineage because they're thousands of miles away, and it's just impossible to like get everybody on both sides of my family together for enough times, enough birthdays, enough graduations. Like, people don't even remember the names of their extended family because they see them so infrequently. And you're telling me that is
it's a modern invention,
completely modern invention.
Yeah, that's and I think it's something that first of all, you would live with your extended family in most cases. In most parts of the world, that's still a thing. You live like in a big house with your extended family. But yeah, I think part of that, I don't know. I often wonder, like, I just moved back to Atlanta, and so I'm having to put myself now in a lot of situations where I'm like going to places to meet people, and it feels like horrible. It's horrible. And it's like, I'm pretty, I've done a lot of like stuff in my, like I've put myself out there quite a lot in my life. So it's like, I should be comfortable with this now, but it still feels like instinctually like fight or flight. And I wonder if that's because it is unnatural in a way.
It is.
Yeah. Like you're kind of supposed to be, you make yourself uncomfortable on the hunt. You make yourself uncomfortable, not in your village, like trying to meet people because you know everybody. And I often wonder what it does, you know, nature versus nurture with psychology, but what it does, especially like maybe somebody whose father or mother is in the armed forces and they move around a lot as a kid and they never really have like a community or something like that. Like, what does that do? I don't know. I just think it's kind of antithetical to, now it kind of happens to all of us, but it's antithetical to how things have always been historically.
It has to be. It's funny you say that because people, I think, are quick to say I'm introverted or I'm extroverted or like I don't like meeting new people. Even up until, think about, so my grandpa was the first one in his family to go to university. Prior to that, it was just subsistence farmers. The Stumphouses have been farmers for a really long time, even going back into Hungary. And when they came to Saskatchewan, Canada, and then into Ohio, it was just farming. And then my grandfather's father's brothers all lived in houses that they built right next to each other. And so like he grew up with his uncles, and they all were just working on the land over there. And he was the first one to go to college. But now it's like, how common is it for kids to go to school across the state or out of state? And then as soon as you're there, you spend 4 years getting to know other people. And so you're either going to live there or you're going to get a job that's going to take you elsewhere. And then boom, just atomization of everybody. And so you'll see your family occasionally. And I just think that it can't, we have to, I'm striving to find the language to explain what I already know, what you and I already know, which is like, that's demented, that's corrupting something real. And I just want to find the language to explain like why that's mangling something that we are.
It's interesting. This is something I'm talking about in my newest video, but I think we think of ourselves as so much more progressive than our ancestors. And we think of something like mental health, which I think all this is tied up in, the loneliness epidemic and all of these things, and that separation and isolation aren't good for us. And I think we think in the past, like there was no conception of mental health. And if anything was wrong with you mentally or emotionally, everybody thought you were possessed by demons or whatever. But if you go back to the Middle Ages and actually read like firsthand accounts, it's really interesting. The village social unit. What happens in a medieval village, a close-knit medieval village where everybody knows each other, if somebody's not like everybody else? If somebody maybe has Asperger's or you know has some sort of emotional difficulty or developmental delay or whatever. I think our assumption, because we think of the Middle Ages in such a negative way, is like that person will be, everybody'd say they're a witch or they burn them at the stake or whatever. But what you really see is an aspect of like community care. The community kind of like coalesces around that person and protects them. You know, so if it's somebody who, like, even just think like the town drunk. The concept of the town drunk, which we've moved farther and farther away from village life in America. Now the town drunk is a homeless guy at the intersection holding a cardboard sign. You have no idea who he is. You're not going to open your car window to give him money. He might jump in. You don't know him. But if you think about it, like 100 years ago or farther back than that, you knew the town drunk. If you were like out and about and you saw him like stumbling and he like hits his arm, like you help him get to his house because you know where he lives. And it's like all these things that we take for granted is like how we relate to each other and how we take care of each other. We've become so progressive with our ideas about everything from mental health to like what it means to be human and our freedom as people. But in some ways, if you lose the community, you lose individual humanity too, in a way. Because, okay, so like we're so progressive and we're so great, but that example right there, driving here, there was a homeless guy not too far down the road with a sign. It's like, I have no idea who that is. I'm not going to stop and give him money. And that's because I'm evil, but also because, you know, I don't know who this guy is. And I live in a place with millions and millions of people. I see that guy every day.
It's unsafe, actually.
Yeah, it's unsafe. But it's like, if I know, oh, that's George, the town drunk, and like I've had a million interactions with him. I've known him since he was a teenager.
Yeah.
Let me help him get home or give him $1 or whatever. It's much different. I think the way that the bigger society gets and the more isolated we get, the less humanity we see in each other. And that's where you get.
Well, and this sort of goes back to the differentiation conversation or the discrimination conversation is, I believe discrimination is inevitable because we are finite creatures. So either your family matters or they don't, but you can't say that your family matters and every family matters because you can't assist and attend to every family, right? If your father growing up worked and provided a living for your family and everybody else in the entire town, you guys would be starving. Nobody would have any food. That's why communism doesn't work, obviously. And so the idea that we have to attend and service everybody, I think, is extremely exhausting. And definitely social media kind of requires that. Like, did you hear about, what do you think about? It's like, oh gosh, that's just so much output.
And what always frustrated me about it, and I've seen this quite a lot in my personal life, is that almost becomes a substitute for caring about something. Like, I care about Palestine, I care about Ukraine deeply, even though it has no impact on me and I have no way to help. I care about it very deeply and it's become an integral part of my personality. That is substituted for actual local effective action.
Yeah.
So instead of actually going to help at the soup kitchen in my community or doing something useful that's actually impactful, I'm going to tweet a lot about Palestine and I'm going to cancel you if you don't wear a keffiyeh at this rally. It's like so ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it gets tied up in identity, and then no actual change happens, like the No Kings rally, which was a success because we still have no kings. There's no kings in America. It was a roaring success. But I remember telling a friend of mine, they were like, "Are you going to the No Kings rally with us today?" And I'm like, "No." And it's not even a political decision. It's not because I support the current administration. It's like, what are we protesting? The whole thing is just a social media stunt. It's ridiculous. I'm not going to go stand in the park for no reason. But it becomes a substitute for like, am I going to go do something? I don't know. Am I going to do acts of service in my community that actually matter?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe that's what Christ was saying when he's like, the poor will always be with you. And the idea of like the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, like this is the concentric circle that you can attend to. Your heart, your people in your community. But the hard part is, and this is, I'm finally getting some clarity on the idea of like homelessness and serving the homeless and not doing that, because all growing up I would feel just bereft seeing the homeless. And then I remember in high school we actually went to a Catholic high school, and we would go into Detroit and we would give coats to the people who were sleeping outside in Detroit, Michigan winters, which were brutal, sub-zero temperatures. And as a kid, I'm just like, bereft. I don't know how to assimilate this level of suffering and poverty. And then you feel guilt about your own, like what you have, and you're confused, like, why is society set up this way? How can I help these people? But at the same time, you're also like really worried that like, I can't just expose myself to infinity strangers who by very definition, like are not operating on the same culture or moral code that I am. Like they might hurt me. And now it kind of makes sense that like, well, actually, yeah, the number of human persons and then the atomization. So there's no community. The word community doesn't even mean anything anymore. That like, how are you supposed to attend to the town drunk because you know him? And I think so many people would be much more willing to give of themselves and be of service if there was an understanding of that. But now it's like, if I do that, it might be a zero-sum game. Like if I help this person, I might die.
Yeah.
They might sell my TV and go buy crack.
Mhm.
Like you can't just open yourself up like that.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I feel like kind of when you care about everything, you really end up caring about nothing, and it's a situation of convenience.
Yes.
But I used to live in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is right outside Boston, and I remember like when the whole Palestine thing happened, like right after the initial attacks. This would have been like early 2024, maybe a few months after. I went to like a rally with some friends, a Palestine rally, pro-Palestine rally, and the person with the bullhorn was saying the city of Somerville, Massachusetts, needs to use its voice to stop this conflict. And everybody's like, rah! And I'm sitting there like, is anybody like actually conceptualizing what that means? Because that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then on the way home, I walked through Davis Square, which my Somervilleans will know is a homeless colony. There's like, it's like crackheads and junkies shooting up in broad daylight in front of like children and students. And it's like, but what about, so the city of Somerville needs to use its voice for Palestine, but what about what's happening right here in our own communities?
Right.
And there was this church in Davis Square that was trying to convert part of the church during off hours into like a warming shelter for homeless during the winter.
Yeah.
And all these good liberals that had been at the Palestine rally and I'm not even like, politically, I'm all over the place. So I'm not like dissing liberals specifically, but these Somerville liberals are like, absolutely not will you build a warming shelter with our tax dollars. But here they are saying the city of Somerville needs to use it. It's just like, I don't know. And it comes back to that Dunbar number. And
this is an interesting point about attention and parasites of attention and the directing. If you can direct the attention of the populace, I think you can maintain certain elements of control. And so it would be, I think everybody would agree with like premise one, we're finite creatures, both in what we have, what we possess, and what we can give. Two, it would be reasonable to assume that we should help the people that we have more control over helping before we help the people we have less control over helping. And everybody would want there to be, if you could snap your fingers, no suffering, recess for everybody, gumdrops galore, hooray. But if it's the case that you're finite creatures and you should help in concentric circles of what you can control, then how can you convince everybody to not build a warming shelter, but instead use your voice to affect a conflict in the Middle East that you absolutely cannot affect? And that has to be a question of like manipulation of attention. And how else are you doing that than the magic black squares that we're carrying around in our pockets all day? And it's like what a masterclass in manipulation that you could subvert somebody to not even act in their own self-interest, let alone the interest of their immediate community, if there even is such a thing anymore, but instead will spend their entire afternoon, painting a sign or buying a whatever hat thing you mentioned.
I
don't even know what that is.
You gotta have those like scarf things there.
Like, you're going on Amazon and you're overnight, you're giving money to Jeff Bezos so you can get a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, how do we get to a point? And is there any historical precedent for that level of confusion?
I mean, in an era before mass communication, it's difficult to say. In terms of, we're now living in an era where it's so easy. And I think what we saw with Ukraine and with Palestine most recently is like, kind of this started with the war on terror in the early 2000s, where it was like for the first time, the entire war was like broadcast into your home. That was kind of like Vietnam and Desert Storm, but like really Iraq was like the first time it was like, this is really, but then now it's not just on the nightly news. It's like, you can scroll TikTok and see the atrocities in Gaza. And like these young people have no stomach for it. It makes sense to me that they're like walking out of their college classes and protesting. Like, why is our government contributing to what I am literally seeing on my phone as a humanitarian crisis? So I think that's part of it. But then the other part of that is you can weaponize all of that so easily if you know what you're doing. And of course, these guys know what they're doing. Why do you think all of a sudden in the last few years before the 2024 election, Zuckerberg's meeting with Trump and all these guys who wouldn't touch him in 2022, who were condemning him and making sure that, none of his followers had any voice on social media and all of their accounts were being deleted. Now all of a sudden Zuckerberg is apologizing to Trump and meeting with him, and everybody's throwing money behind his campaign. Don't you think there was some backdoor deal done? Like, hey, we'll help you if you scratch our back, if we scratch yours. This is the greatest avenue for state propaganda that's ever existed. And if we can get people like the warming shelter in Palestine, this was during the Biden presidency, but same concept. If we can get everybody so pissed off and obsessed about what's happening overseas, we can just rape you at home and nobody will. I use strong language like that because it's true. And it's like, even what we're seeing with the current administration, we will do whatever we want to you at home, and all you're going to talk about is Iran and what's going on in Iran. And it's a really, really useful piece of propaganda, as opposed, it's interesting. There are different heretical movements in the Middle Ages that's the closest I can think of, like sort of propaganda being used to spread a social idea like wildfire. Like the Pope is the Antichrist. There is no Christian story of salvation. It's actually like Manichaean dualism, where there's a good God and an evil God. And actually the things you do, so this is like kind of like what the Cathars believed, who were, if you've heard of like the Albigensian Crusade, they were the ones who were crusaded against by the Catholic Church. But basically what they believed is like nothing you really do in this life matters. All that matters, it actually kind of brought back that idea of like deathbed confession, deathbed baptism. As long as you get your last rites and absolution, none of it matters. So it was like almost like totally against Catholic social teaching. No faith really until you're on your deathbed, and no works at all. Like you can so they were known, who knows how much of this was real, but like, orgies and adultery and, there was no moral code to the Cathars. And again, a lot of that was probably propaganda against a socially problematic group, but they spread like wildfire in southern France and northern Italy because there was existing dissatisfaction with the clergy there. And so like how quickly a populace is willing to fall into line with something like that, and how much confusion can be caused. I mean, this is even before the printing press, just by word of mouth. I think kind of has to do with who recognizes what's fertile soil. And I think, we're seeing that now. Your attention is the last thing to be colonized. We've colonized the entire earth, and your attention is the last thing. And they are coming for every second of it, as Bo Burnham said in some interview a few years ago. Like, these tech companies, if it was up to them, you would not sleep. You'd be on the phone looking at ads 24 hours a day.
It's very nearly there though. If you like, I interview people who use Shift, and I talk to them about, okay, prior to Shift, how long were you on your phone? And it's a range. On average, 5 hours. The worst I've heard is about 8.
Yeah.
And I know there's people that it's worse than that.
Oh yeah.
But on average, about 5 hours. And if you think about, and that's not, I open WhatsApp or I use my maps. That's 5 hours of Instagram. That's 5 hours of TikTok. And so if you're week, 7 days, 35 waking hours attending to the doom scrolling.
It's crazy.
That's a full day and a half, little over a day, of attention that like you are not giving to your family, to your hobbies, to your passions, to even just being creative. Like now that you've kind of opened up that space, you can germinate an idea and come up with a new thought, a new synthesis of all this information. Like that's being taken from you. That interior life, that your creativity is just gone.
Right.
And you're just attending to Instagram or whatever it is. The last thing to be colonized is your attention. I love that because I think that ensures that all of the work that they've done up until that point is unchallenged. Like if you can be a magician and direct attention so that like you're never going to solve the homelessness crisis, and you are going to only attend to things that you'll never affect. You and I are never going to change the outcome of things happening overseas and vice versa. But if that's all we're attending to, their reign is secure. And the irony of this is like, I'm not advocating for revolution. 1, because I'd go to prison. And 2, because I don't care. Like I just want agency and fulfillment for each person. And what I've come to realize, and I'm curious if you agree with this, is you can get all of that just by turning it off. You're not going to affect gas prices. That's still going to be tough. It is still going to be hard to make money. It'll probably be difficult to find a loving spouse. But ultimately, if you just turn it all off, it being the vies for your attention, basically stops existing.
Yeah, it is interesting how I don't think you realize until you turn it off how much it's affecting your mental health, or maybe just maybe not mental health broadly. I mean, for different people, yes, but I don't even think what we were talking about earlier. You wake up and you scroll your phone first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
First of all, I've heard different neuroscientists say how bad that is for like your attention threshold for the day and whatever.
Okay.
But it's also you're immediately opening TikTok, and everything on there in some way or another is designed to elicit a certain reaction from you.
Yeah.
Every piece of content is designed that way. I don't consciously think of this with my like YouTube videos, but like I want you to have an opinion about what I'm saying. I want you to feel a certain type of way or something. So it's like think about all of that like engineered at mass scale and an algorithm. Not even you have to sit through a 25-minute medieval mindset video that's going to give it to you in 25 seconds or 2.5 seconds. Like how quickly can we distill that into your brain? And what that does, I love that you use the phrase interior life, because I feel like that's something that's completely died in the modern world. And it's something that late medieval Catholics kind of started to label, but I think that just ancient humanity just had. You had an interior life as a byproduct of just being a human being. And now I feel like it's something you really purposely have to cultivate. And all of it, I've noticed in my own lifetime, and maybe you've noticed this too, the boundaries between it used to be, there was the internet and there was real life. And something might be a big deal on the internet, and like you talk to your friends at school and they had no idea what, like it just wasn't, it was still on your dad's computer in the office.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't,
Yeah.
Whereas now it's the opposite. It feels like online is more real world than offline, which is crazy. And this blurring between the digital and the physical world, I think can I don't know, it causes this like split and this like dichotomy in the mind of modern man. And it's like you said, like these everything's vying for your attention. These are weapons of mass distraction. And I don't think people realize that it's not real.
Yeah.
Like what I just said, that the online now feels more real. What's happening on the internet now feels more real than real life. Only seems that way until you shift your phone. Then you shift your phone and you're like, and this is weird too. This has been regional for me too.
That's so cool.
That I lived in New England for the last like 6 years. I was in Massachusetts and then I was in Maine. I don't know if it's just a New England thing, but like post-COVID, just the chronically onlineness, the cynicism, the like, just the vibes were so bad.
Yeah.
And then coming down to Georgia, it feels like it's still like 2009 here. Like, I don't know. This is maybe such a ridiculous generalization. I don't know if this is even worth putting in, but it's like, it just like people still talk to each other. You go to the store and like people are having conversations in the aisles and things are a little bit more laid back. And it's like, oh yeah, not everybody's like miserable and chronically online and glued to their phone and whatever. Maybe they still are, who knows? But the point being that you don't realize how fake it all is until you turn it off.
Yeah, and by fake, like I don't think either of us are making the argument that a certain thing is or isn't happening.
Mm-hmm.
But fake in the sense of, again, finite person, finite resources. Like it's not happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
And more than that, you're not obligated to attend to it.
Mm-hmm.
So like there have always been atrocities and evils in the world, but like who would reasonably make the argument that you and I must spend all day grieving for all the evil and suffering that's happening in the world?
I think like empathy is a good impulse and compassion is a good impulse. And I think it makes sense that somebody would see something, an atrocity on their TikTok feed or whatever, and it would hurt their heart. And I think there's something very real and human there. But I think when like what we were talking about before, that takes a substitute for local action. And that's when it becomes problematic. Like when you spend all day tweeting and posting TikToks about what's going on 10,000 miles away and you're not doing anything to affect any change in your local community. What do they say? Think global, but act local. And I think that's really the side of the messaging that you don't see a lot, at least in these like very pro social progress circles. And I feel like that's part of what's missing. It's like empathy's great, compassion's great. And I don't think the opposite of that has to be, you shouldn't care at all and you should turn off your heart to the suffering of the world. But I think if it's not resulting in anything real that's happening in your physical, practical life, like who did you help today? And like even I've heard people say in terms of like help and service, acts of service, like you can invest in the penny stocks, meaning like it might just be you pick up a piece of trash off the ground or you hold the door for somebody. But if you're spending all day inside posting on TikTok, you got to shift your phone. And then, you start to kind of notice the world around you and the things people actually need.
Well, I don't think you can think global and act local Because I think if it's true that what you think about, if what you attend to shapes your action and your beliefs, then you won't.
Maybe think local, act local. Yeah.
Right? That would, I mean, it would at least start there. At least start by seeing what's going on around you and then build out from that.
I feel like the point we were discussing, maybe closer to the beginning, that the thing that you give your attention to is the most important thing, or the thing that kind of defines your existence. I feel like that's maybe one of the core principles. I mean, if we're going back to like product promotion, or even just like even shift or non-shift, like explaining to people the importance of like digital hygiene and like having your like understanding your habits and your bad habits online. I just feel like not enough of us, we're all such slaves to inertia, and not enough of us really understand the effects these things that we're interacting with on a daily basis are having on us. And I do sometimes wonder if it's going to be the same thing. Like you look back and watch old movies of people smoking everywhere on planes, and you're like, this is crazy. How did they do this? And I just wonder if it's going to be the same thing we're going to look back on and see something similar. And I wonder, I think there's a lot of hopelessness, and I think social media kind of propagates hopelessness. And like we were talking about earlier, the algorithm profits off of it. You will scroll more if you're outraged than if you're happy. Even if you're made to laugh, you'll scroll less than if you're outraged. I guess all these behavioral studies have shown this. But I think the thing to remember is like there's no such thing as, so far, there has been no generation that has witnessed the end of the human story. It's always continued. I think there's this weird narcissism we have, especially in our main character energy generation, where we all think we're the last, like we're going to see the whole thing go up in smoke. You know what I mean? We're going to see the apocalypse happen. And there have been plenty of generations that thought that. Actually, when the year 1000 happened in medieval Europe, in 999, because of the millennial reign of Christ and some of these biblical prophecies, they were like, in the year, on January 1st, 1000, like it's all going to go up in smoke. It's like a 2012 type thing.
Or like a Y2K. You're telling me there was a Y2K in 999?
Right.
That's
there was.
Hysterical.
Yes. And
wow.
Then it didn't happen, and everybody awkwardly had to go to work the next day. It was crazy. But it's just like, I feel like there's nothing, and I see this in the comment section sometimes on my more hope core videos about a new renaissance or things that we can do, that there's a type of person, or maybe like a fear that rages against rages against the idea that there's anything you can do in the wave of this overwhelming, kind of like thing that's being pushed on us, World War III, climate change, AI, all these things that are, and there's nothing that you individually can do, so you might as well just doom scroll and order DoorDash and, screw it. I see a lot of fatalism from people, and I don't know how you can convince somebody that that's not true, or that that's not a fruitful way of living. And I don't think lecturing or admonishing somebody is really ever the way to enact real change. But I do just wonder if you could see the effects of turning off the spigot for just a short period of time. Like, I don't know, it could open up a new, I don't know. If you keep doing the same things, you'll get the same results, I feel like.
I wonder if it's a self-esteem issue, where while simultaneously being more individualistic and more narcissistic than any previous generation, I also think we might have the lowest view of ourselves. I don't know that we really see our lives as worth living. Probably a good reason for that is because we don't know what that even means or looks like. So it's hard to live something that you don't even know.
Right.
When you don't have a community, you don't have a history, you don't have an understanding of where you've been or where you're going. Yeah, why would I do this thing called life? It's the rats in a cage. We're just gonna go for the morphine water because there's nothing else there for us. So I do wonder if part of the solution is pride in a good way, which is to say an act of charity toward God. Like, love your neighbor as yourself implies love yourself. You love yourself as an act of charity toward God. It's an act of justice toward God to love yourself. You have to, because he's keeping you in existence and he's not wrong. So you have to love yourself. You have to take care of yourself and strive toward self-actualization. And I think that probably starts with knowing what it means to be self-actualized. And I believe that's why I'm so drawn to your content. I think that's why millions of people are so drawn to your content, is because you're telling a story that makes so much more sense to them than what we're living through right now. They hear you talk about that and they're like, yeah, that's familiar to me, that speaks to me.
Mm.
How can I live that? And the answer is like, you got to turn off the noise first. You have to shut that off, and maybe then you can at least start to enact a bit of the story that you're telling.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I'm probably butchering this, I haven't read it in a minute, but the biblical story of Elijah in the storm, and he hears the still small voice of God, but he listens for it. And I think even, I mean, the reason I make the content that I make is because even in the midst of the storm, I think even in the storm, the storm of your algorithm, I've seen content from other creators that has totally changed my perspective, and totally given me hope, which is almost paradoxical that this platform that I make my money off of, but that I also simultaneously view as like could be harmful, social media, but that also there's great things on there that I've learned, or I don't think I ever would have really found Catholicism the way that I did if I didn't follow some great Catholic creators at the beginning and all those things. So it's such a mixed bag, and I don't think the answer is the Luddite answer of like throw away your laptop and your phone and get rid of it all. And it's like, dude, I love Spotify, I love Google Maps, I love YouTube. YouTube's great. I see so much great stuff on YouTube and so much great human ingenuity and creativity. And I do think in an era where there's a fear among a lot of people of the very thing that makes us human, which again goes back to our generation being so self-absorbed, but also so confused about what it even means to be human. And I think when such a large percentage of us just views ourselves as like sentient bags of meat, like that kind of does something to your self-esteem. If you're like, I am just the product of a scientific chain of reactions, there's no soul, there's no higher story being told here, it can like lead you down some pretty dark pathways, and it hits a dead end. And then there's really nothing there, but at least you get to feel like super intelligent about, this self-knowledge that you've gained. And that's not to criticize those people, because I was one. And
I was too.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's any truth or beauty or growth there, really. And I feel the same way about militant religiosity that's not open-minded or compassionate or loving, and that's totally Pharisaic and obsessed with rules and who's right and who's wrong. So it kind of applies everywhere. But I think in an era where we're seeing AI, which I believe has so many wonderful beneficial use cases and that I'm extremely optimistic about, like enter into like places that we feel like this is the boundary, like this is our humanness and you can't come in here. Like, I don't need AI to paint me a picture. I would like AI to help me fill out the spreadsheet at work, but I don't need it to make a song for me. I want to listen to a musician. And I think that's actually going to be extremely helpful for our generation, our narcissistic generation, because it'll force us to define what humanity is and what it means to be human. Because it'll force us to create that boundary, like the boundary of community. Community is a boundary between what is and what isn't, what we believe and what we don't believe. And if you don't believe it, you're not part of the community. And it's the same thing, like we know what humanity is because it's not that.
Yeah. Let's land it there. That was a great ending.
All right.